replaced by someone I barely recognized. The sign on the frosted glass door said, Matthew J. Singletary, Director of Corporate Systems Analysis. That's me, Matt, to my friends. I'm nearly 6 feet tall, strong, blue-eyed, confident, and a well-respected businessman. At 29, I was probably the only person with that title in the business world. When asked what my title meant, I would shrug. No one ever explained it to me, but I knew my job in the company. Think of the business world like a Western movie, and I was the person who came in to make things better and create a great place for everyone. My boss, the owner of Reese Donaldson Enterprises, used me like a trusted helper. I went to different branches to check how they worked from top to bottom. I could make many changes right there. If it was a big decision, like suggesting to let an executive go, I would send my ideas to Mr. Donaldson. He rarely said no, and if he did, he would explain his reasons to me. I wasn't sure if I was at the top of management or the bottom of the executive group, but it didn't matter. The only person I had to answer to was the big boss. If there were issues among staff, a quick call to him would settle things. I had his private number saved, while many senior staff members didn't. I had a talent for spotting problems, finding slow points in work, and identifying issues that cost Mr. Donaldson money. I used these skills every day. I was really good at my job, and many learned not to cross me, as I could notice dishonesty quickly. At least I could do this in my work life. My personal life was a different story. It was the day after Independence Day, and I was picking up everything I needed for the day into my briefcase. It was only 10:30 in the morning on Friday, but we were all getting an early start on the weekend because Mr. Cummings had just announced that he was closing the office early and sending everyone home. He said that most of the businesses we relied on were already shut down. Since his employees wouldn't be able to get much done, he thought it was best to close up. That sounded good to me. With my briefcase packed, I closed my office door and gave the sign on the door a playful tap. Because there were people watching me, I pretended to wipe a non-existent smudge off my sleeve. When I saw a crowd heading toward the elevators, I quickly ran that way as if I was racing to get there first. Some of the guys and girls started running too, all in good fun. Donaldson's was a family business, and we all got along well. I got home by 11:10. I was excited as I took out my new toy, a Shaba drone. It was one of the best drones available and had a long range, even better than some military ones. From the owner's manual, I learned that Shaba means ghost in Arabic, which was the name given to certain stealth fighters in past wars. This drone model was quiet and stealthy, just like the name suggested. My wonderful wife, Faye, had found this treasure on one of those bidding sites for a very low price. She outbid someone else by just 1 cent at the last moment. Now it was mine, a special birthday gift from last Sunday. I had been working on it all week after work, getting it ready to fly. All I needed to do was check it one last time and clean off some fingerprints on one of the rotor blades. It was ready for its first flight, and I wanted Faye, my lovely wife of 3 years, to see it. That morning, Faye had mentioned she would be out showing properties to clients but should be back in the early evening. I wanted her home sooner, like right away. I didn't usually call her at work, but this time I tried reaching her on her company phone, hoping she could take a break and come home for the first flight. It was just after noon, and she might still be at lunch, but my call went straight to voicemail. So did my next 2 attempts. I wasn't sure why that happened, since Faye worked for a kind and friendly man named Martin Rutherford, who had a policy that staff should always be reachable through their work phones. The main office was on the southwest side of town, but I knew Faye wasn't there since I had called the main number first. I felt a bit frustrated because it seemed like Mr. Rutherford expected everyone to be available. Maybe she was in an area with a weak cell signal. It happens. After a while, I decided to stop waiting for my wife. She might not be that excited to see the Shaba fly anyway. Flying toys were not her favorite. I rolled the toy onto the driveway in front of our garage, started the small motors, and checked all the functions. I took it for a quick test flight, moving it in a lazy pattern between our house and across the street. I got used to the controls and the view from the remote control. The video from the camera on the bottom was very clear. I landed the small craft back on the driveway. While the rotor slowed down, I took the remote inside to keep it out of the sunlight. I connected the video feed to the big monitor I usually used with my laptop. I loved using the bigger screen with my laptop, and it worked great with the remote for the drone. Soon I was flying again from the comfort of my desk. I guided the drone into the center of the street, then turned it east and added power to climb up to 40 feet. That height seemed safe enough to avoid any poles or houses nearby, even if I drifted from the road. After a few minutes of looking around through the drone's cameras, I settled down. I was having a great time. It reminded me of the past. I loved flying, I always had. My Uncle Jake taught me to fly when I was a teenager, and I flew solo at 15 in a small plane. I earned a multi-engine certificate 2 years later to fly Uncle Jake's twin-engine Cessnas. Those were some of the best years of my life. Nowadays, renting even a small plane was really expensive. Times were tough for Faye and me, and I just couldn't spend money on flying. This little drone was the closest I could get to flying, and I loved it. I flew a few blocks without anyone noticing the drone above. It was very quiet, and it wasn't big enough to catch much attention. Most people tend to look only at things at eye level or below. They didn't see me, but I could see them. Kids were playing in their yards, adults washing their cars, and a golden retriever was getting a bath in one backyard and clearly not enjoying it at all. Everyone was busy with the everyday things people do on a warm summer afternoon. I paused the drone before a nice brick house just before the intersection and took the chance to practice hovering, then adjusting my height. I didn't want to keep moving east, as I would be flying close to the home of Miss Kelly Sanderson. The woman seemed around the same age as Faye and me, but some people joked that she had celebrated her 30th birthday for 4 years in a row. Who really knew for sure? What we did know was that she had recently gone through her 3rd divorce and was looking for a new partner, whether for something serious or just a casual connection, whichever came first. Kelly was known for being flirtatious. Everyone said that she followed through on her playful offers. In fact, last summer, her sister joked that Kelly would flirt with anyone, even something as strange as a fence post, if it promised her a nice dinner and drinks. I was the only guy who overheard that through an open kitchen window, and I quickly moved away. I didn't want to get involved further. Unfortunately, I did know that Kelly didn't seem to mind if the person she was flirting with was married or single. Kelly Sanderson made me uneasy. I made a quick left turn and started heading back west, speeding up a bit. No one seemed to notice the flying drone, even with the sound of it zooming by. I guided the Shaba west, crossing several streets until I reached the edge of our neighborhood and slowed down to a quieter pace. All the homes in our area looked quite similar. They shared a lot of the same design, with spacious yards, 2-car garages, and open layouts. The western side was known as the George Orwell neighborhood. These homes were slightly nicer than others, with 3 or 4-car garages and nice swimming pools in the backyards. I reached the cul-de-sac where the nicest houses in this part of the suburb were located. Beyond that was just open land, and I wanted to bring the drone back home to check on everything, see how long it would take to recharge after flying for so long, and a million other small tasks. I started to turn the drone around to bring it home. As it turned left and steadied on an easterly path, I caught a hint of color out of the corner of my eye, right in front of Taylor Henning's garage. I hesitated, feeling a frown forming on my face. I turned the drone back toward that flash of color because it reminded me of my wife's Lexus, the one we had bought a few months ago so Faye could impress potential home buyers. There was no good reason for my wife's car to be in this part of the neighborhood, especially not at the Hennings' house. But there it was. I recognized the car right away. It was my wife Faye's. Even before I got close enough to read the license plate, I knew. I zoomed in with my camera just to confirm, and sure enough, it was her Lexus. "What?" I muttered, feeling a pit grow in my stomach. Something wasn't right, and I had a sinking feeling that I wouldn't like whatever was going on. Movement caught my eye in the Hennings' backyard. Guiding my drone, I descended carefully, making sure to avoid any obstacles as I moved in closer. As the drone hovered above, I could see Faye down there by the pool with Taylor Hennings and his wife, Brianna. They seemed to be enjoying the warm summer day lying by the poolside. But there was something about the scene that hit me hard. The situation felt wrong, like a punch in the gut, and the sense of betrayal began to weigh on me. I took a deep breath, trying to get control of myself. The hurt was raw and my emotions churned inside me. After a few minutes, though, I managed to calm myself a little, just enough to watch without letting the anger take over. Surprisingly, I found myself detaching, like it was just some scene in a movie that didn't mean much. I didn't know how, but as time went on, I felt less of the pain, almost as if my mind was creating a barrier between me and the hurt. It was strange, but gave me a little relief, at least for the moment. Taylor didn't seem like much of a catch. He was starting to develop a noticeable belly, and I couldn't understand why Faye would choose him if she wanted to be with someone else. Brianna was different. She was fit and short, with brown hair and a pleasant face. She had a curvy figure. I didn't even know Faye was interested in women. It felt like I was kept in the dark, but I figured if she was curious, Brianna might have caught her eye. I could feel anger rising inside me. I let it build up as a way to cope with the pain. Feeling angry helped me process my feelings and think clearly. I was filled with rage. I couldn't understand why Faye would want to be with someone else when I thought our marriage was solid. I was 29 and Faye was 27. We had been together for almost 5 years, dating for one, being exclusive for another, and then getting married. Our 3rd anniversary had just passed. I believed our marriage was healthy. We spent time together and were intimate several times a week. There hadn't been any major arguments. I thought our connection was strong and didn't see why this was happening. My jaw was set tight as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. I needed to make a decision, and it was time to do so. I realized it was time to move forward, both literally and emotionally. There was no justification for my wife betraying me like this. If there was no force involved, I couldn't see a path to forgiving either her or Taylor. I thought it over, testing my resolve. Nothing convinced me that our marriage was still intact. Taking a deep breath, I decided to take the first step toward a new chapter in my life. I needed to let them know that their actions had consequences. I made sure everything was recorded from the drone's video feed, in vivid color and clear detail. I had it set up for slow motion and high-quality still images, gathering everything I might need for a divorce. I wasn't naive. I'm aware that my financial situation was not looking good. A friend of mine had recently gone through a divorce, and I listened to him share his feelings many times. Nowadays, it seems like personal responsibility in marriage is overlooked in divorce cases, where everything is labeled no fault. Our society has moved on from making judgments about breaking marriage vows. It makes you wonder if this is truly progress. However, divorce isn't just about what happens in the courtroom. I felt a strong need to uncover the reasons for my friend's marriage troubles, so I started gathering what I could find out. I managed to get a drone closer to the scene, lowering it until it was just a few feet above the ground. I adjusted the camera to focus tightly on the group involved, wanting to capture every detail of the moment. It was clear they were caught up in what they were doing, completely unaware of the drone nearby. Suddenly, Brianna noticed the drone hovering above her. It must have seemed like an enormous bug buzzing close by. I decided to have some fun and moved the drone up and down. Brianna's reaction was surprising. Her mouth opened wide, likely in disbelief. My wife, Faye, turned her head to see what was happening. That was the moment I wanted to capture, an expression of surprise. Both women were clearly reacting strongly, even if I couldn't hear what they were saying. I wished the drone could record sound, but it wasn't equipped for that, which was unfortunate. Brianna suddenly moved, getting off the lounger in a hurry. In her rush, she tripped and stumbled, dragging part of the lounger with her as she fell into the pool. Faye was caught off guard by the sudden movement. My soon-to-be's wife, Faye, ended up falling into the pool, her mouth wide open as she screamed. Taylor Henning quickly got off Faye and tried to stand up to see what was happening, but he didn't get far. He noticed a large creature nearby and tried to run away from it. In his confusion, he stumbled and lost his balance. His foot slipped over the edge of the pool, and he fell hard onto the concrete, one leg in the water and the other stretched out in front of him. From the look on his face, he definitely felt pain. I couldn't help but chuckle at that. Maybe there really was a balance in life, some sort of fairness. Faye and Brianna were still in the pool, splashing around and looking confused. They seemed to be in shock and were not calming down. I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction as I raised my hand, gesturing at them even though they couldn't see me. I flew my drone higher and maneuvered it above the pool, moving it back and forth as if it were in a chase. The battery was running low, so I moved the drone back over the patio. I pushed the motors to their limit and made it dive as much as I could. Suddenly, the screen went dark, and I felt a bit of hope that maybe the drone had broken into pieces. Although I doubted it would happen, it was nice to imagine. I sat there staring at the blank screen for a moment, feeling a wave of frustration over my wife and her choices. Looking at the clock, I realized everything had changed at 12:38 p.m. on Friday, July 5th. It was a day that would be hard to forget. I had no idea where my marriage would go from here, and honestly, I didn't feel like I cared much at all. To my surprise, it took Faye almost an hour to get back home after being with Taylor and Brianna. We had shared this house for the last 18 months since we bought it together. I remembered how hard we had worked to save enough money for the down payment on our house. The mortgage payments were tough, but Faye really wanted it to show that we were moving up in our community. She was so happy when we moved in, and I was glad we had made that decision. Then Faye wanted a new car to drive around potential buyers, a $60,000 car. Looking back, Faye got the home she dreamed of, and I settled for an unreliable desktop computer until my company gave me a laptop. Faye got a fancy new car, while I had an old toy that someone else no longer wanted. Now, Faye was able to explore her own interests, and I was left at home wondering what had gone wrong in my life. As I waited for her, I went over the video I had made with the three of them. I even found time to create a highlight video, thinking it might be useful someday. Faye stormed in looking furious. Her hair was still wet and hanging in her face. She wore the business suit she'd had on earlier, but it was damp in several spots. She seemed to have broken a heel, because she was limping with one shoe on and the other in her hand, the heel uneven. "What do you think you are doing?" she shouted, her face red with anger. Her eyes were filled with intensity as she glared at me. It seemed she understood what the damaged drone on the Hennings patio meant. After all the time that had passed since I sent it crashing down, I had begun to wonder myself. I raised an eyebrow. She was using a tactic I recognized well from my work, turning the conversation around to be more aggressive. Faye had clearly taken to heart the idea that sometimes the best way to handle a situation was to confront it directly. I couldn't help but smirk for a brief moment, which only seemed to make her angrier. "You could have hurt someone with that thing," she yelled. I just watched her. The woman I had married felt distant in that moment. Usually, Faye was an attractive woman, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall with shoulder-length brown hair that framed her heart-shaped face. I had fallen for her cute features and her charm all those years ago. But now the person yelling at me felt like a different person entirely. "What is wrong with you?" she screeched. I wasn't sure what I had expected from her, maybe a little understanding or a bit of regret. But I got nothing of the sort. I could fight back too, though. "You're being unreasonable," I shouted. "I'm just under 6 feet tall and I have a strong voice that carries well." She heard me loud and clear. It definitely caught her attention. "Go upstairs and wash up right now," I continued before she could reply. "And please use plenty of soap to make sure you clean yourself well." She didn't have anything on her face that I could see, but my words made her quiet quickly. Maybe a small part of her felt a bit guilty. Could she actually be feeling some shame? She turned away and went upstairs, balancing awkwardly on her one remaining high heel. I wondered why she hadn't taken both shoes off by now. "And Faye," I called out to her, softening my voice, "when you come back down, please be respectful, all right? You've disrespected our marriage enough for today, and I won't tolerate any more shouting from you, got it?" She didn't answer or nod, but headed up without pushing back. A moment later, I heard the shower start in our bedroom. Faye came back down in about 15 minutes, which was quicker than I expected. Maybe she wanted to get this over with, or maybe she was ready to explain herself. I wasn't holding my breath for an apology, though. If she was planning to apologize, she would have taken longer. I knew her well. My Faye doesn't like admitting she's wrong. She wore one of my old long-sleeved sweatshirts, a pair of blue jeans, and some sneakers. It looked like she was trying to downplay things, wanting to lessen the memory of what she'd done earlier. "Why don't you take a seat?" I said politely from the living room, pointing to the couch on the other side of the coffee table. I was sitting in my chair with my feet flat on the floor. She took off her sneakers in front of the couch, sat down, and tucked her feet underneath her. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. "I'd like to understand a few things, if that's okay," I told her. "First off, why did you suddenly decide to act out in such a way?" Faye leaned back into the cushion, surprised. "Excuse me?" I added quickly. "I kind of lost my cool for a moment there. I'll try to keep my voice down." I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. If you could please help me out, I said in a very polite way. Could you tell me why you decided to end our marriage by being with someone else, two others, actually? And how long has this been happening, if you don't mind sharing? Matt, I'm really sorry you had to see that at the Hennings, Faye said calmly. I picked up on that. People in my job often choose their words carefully. You're saying you're sorry I saw it, I replied sharply, but you're not sorry you did it, is that right? I interrupted. Faye's expression tightened. Honey, she said, avoiding my question. She returned to her earlier point. This doesn't have to be the end. We can get through this and even improve things. I should have talked to you sooner. I realize that now. She leaned forward on the couch. Listen, Matt, we both had experiences before we got married. We know that. I haven't done anything with Taylor and Brianna that I didn't do before, mostly with you, okay? She paused, watching me carefully for my response. Look, all we need to do is adjust a few things and everything will be fine. She was looking at me closely. I clenched my jaw and stayed quiet. Honestly, I wasn't sure where she was going with this. Still no sign of an apology, just that she regretted I found out. I motioned for her to keep going. And I'm not what you called me earlier, she added sharply. Don't ever say that to me again. I stayed silent. It was just a casual thing, she explained. Oh, come on, I blurted out, slapping my hand on my knee. I shook my head in disappointment. I read about this kind of situation. Did you know there are many websites where people who've been hurt gather for support? I asked her, more to myself than expecting an answer. Apparently, it was just casual is one of the most common excuses people use, I continued. I was hoping for something better. The most popular excuse is, I made air quotes with my fingers, it's not what it seems, darling, or something like that. Can't you be a little more original? Faye's expression became serious. It was just casual, Matt, she insisted. That's all, it was just three people having a good time, that's it. Good time, I replied, surprised. I must have misunderstood that. Wow, I should have guessed, right? I think the grin on my face was more of a grimace than actual happiness. I leaned in a bit closer in a playful way. Hey, you know what? I asked in a friendly, secretive tone. I enjoy having a good time, too. How come I wasn't out there having a good time with you all? Can you explain why I wasn't part of this? Fun? Faye looked down, showing a hint of regret for the first time. It was brief, but maybe there was a little hope. We plan to include you, she said quietly. Oh, really? Include me? What does that mean, Faye? I asked, teasing. Were you three cool kids going to let me join your special group when I earned the right to play with everyone else? Is that what you had in mind? I said, sounding sarcastic. She didn't reply right away, so I jumped in again. That's not true, I said sharply. You never meant for me to find out. This include me is just a poor excuse you came up with after you got caught. Faye looked away for a moment. Okay, she said softly, opening her eyes again but still not meeting my gaze. You're right. We should have made sure you were part of it from the beginning. No. I interrupted her before she could finish. She just wasn't getting it. What you should have done is ask me if we, as a married couple, should even think about changing our commitment and going outside our vows. Isn't that what you should have done, Faye? I asked. How could you say that? She shot back, her face flushing with anger. Okay, yes, I should have done that. I messed up, I'm sorry. Yes, you did mess up. I agreed. You chose to ignore our marriage vows. Can you explain why I didn't get a say in this? Why did you decide for both of us? What were you thinking, Faye? Listen, it's not too late, Faye said earnestly, ignoring all my questions. I know now that I should have talked to you first. If I had, everything would have been out in the open, but we can't change the past, can we? We can't go back and make it all right. I shrugged, feeling unsure. Just for the sake of conversation, I said, how could you not even think to talk to me before? What made you feel it was okay to make a decision that would affect both of us and our marriage? She waved her hands in frustration. It seemed she didn't have an answer. She hadn't thought she needed one. Odd. Ugh, I groaned. I took a deep breath and let it out. Well, let me ask that in a different way. I'm really trying to understand. Can you tell me why you never asked me if I wanted to join that little group? I questioned. You said it was just three people having some fun, right? Well, like I said, I enjoy having a good time, just like anyone else. I continued. Why didn't you think your husband might want to have fun too? Maybe you could have convinced me it would be good for our marriage. Brianna is really attractive. She seems like one of those women people admire, doesn't she? I bet I could have really connected with her. I'm curious, dear wife, why didn't you invite me to join from the beginning? Why didn't you think my opinion mattered when you were planning everything? I paused. Why? I don't know, Faye admitted, looking down. I don't remember, maybe because I thought you wouldn't actually want to. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, I replied. You thought I wouldn't want to do it? If that's true, why didn't it make you think maybe it wasn't the right thing to do? She stayed quiet, her face showing frustration. There were many topics Faye didn't want to dive into. Right and wrong were definitely among them. I decided to steer the conversation back to something I had mentioned before. I'm just a bit of a stick in the mud, and you all are the fun ones, the ones who know how to enjoy life. You're the smart ones who get to do things people like me aren't part of, right? That's not how it was, Faye protested. I just didn't think you would. There it was again. I wondered how to make her understand. Okay, so you didn't think I would want to join in, I said slowly. You believed your husband, your partner in this marriage, would not want to be involved in anything outside our marriage, but you did it anyway. Don't I deserve to think it was a mistake? Tell me, how did you decide ignoring my feelings was okay? Faye could see where my questions were leading. She really didn't want to go down that path and shook her head in annoyance. She tried to regain control by shifting back to her own thoughts. Matt, you know I wasn't a virgin when we met. You know who I was involved with back then, right? And I know who you were with too. It was Caitlin, remember? The girl you were seeing when I first met you, see? She paused, watching me. When I didn't respond, I think she felt encouraged, believing I had accepted her point. I hadn't realized it, but I was starting to see that Faye was mixing up things that happened before we decided to be together with things that shouldn't happen after. Matt, I know you're not. You're not overly strict or anything. You can't be upset at... She lowered her voice. At what? I was doing with Brianna, right? And... She hesitated a bit. And what Taylor was doing with me. It wasn't anything you haven't done a million times, right? So, I interrupted her with a quick gesture of my hand. No, Faye, it's not about what happened. It's that you were with someone else and you shouldn't have been doing that. She didn't like my response. She tried to recover. But wait, Matt, you just said you wouldn't mind if I was with Brianna. You said that. Faye leaned in closer. It isn't too late to fix things. I messed up, I just wasn't being honest by not including you from the start, but we can move past that. She pulled her feet from under her and set them on the floor. She leaned forward to make her point and to show she was sincere. Listen, Matt, here's what we can do. Faye reached her hand out toward me, but it was too far. I had a feeling that I would rather be anywhere else than let her touch me. Still, she didn't get up to come closer. Taylor, Brianna, and I were talking after... Faye said, after that incident at their house. She was clearly trying to avoid saying anything that might upset me again. What we can do, Taylor suggested this, we could arrange for you to be with me and Brianna both, or just one of us if you prefer. And for 3 months, Taylor won't see anyone except his wife to make up for the lost time. Her voice faded off. I wondered if she was realizing how inappropriate that sounded. So, I take it 3 months is how long you've been seeing each other, right? I asked. Faye nodded just a little. Is that correct? 3 months? My irritation was growing. Answer me! I raised my voice when she hesitated. Yes, just 3 months, Matt. She paused. So, what about it? Can we fix this and move on? Want me to call Brianna right now? She asked, almost pleading. Good grief, no, I replied sharply. I wouldn't even want to be near that person right now. Not at all. I'm not sure what problems and issues you might have after spending time with those 2 people. Faye sank back against the couch, surprised and confused by my words. Before she could respond, I pressed on. Why did you go behind my back, Faye? She didn't reply right away, still taken aback. Why? I asked again, leaning forward in my seat. Faye's eyes widened in surprise. Why did you choose to spend time with them when you knew it would upset me? I raised my voice. She took a deep breath, gripping the cushion tightly. Why? I repeated. Faye shook her head as if trying to clear her thoughts. Please answer me. Why? I raised my voice again. Because I wanted to, she shouted back. Why can't you understand, Matt? I wanted to break free from this situation we're stuck in. It was exciting to do something different, she continued. I did it because I wanted to. This is my life, she said, gesturing to herself. I have the right to decide what happens to me, and no one else can make that choice. I looked at her, trying to understand. Faye, I don't get it. You know better than this. Who has been telling you these things? She didn't respond, and I sensed she didn't want to engage further. I took a breath and said softly, I get it. You do have the right to make choices about your life. But when we got married, we made an agreement, didn't we? We promised to be loyal to one another. I paused, letting my words sink in. Her expression made it clear she wasn't happy with what I had said. But I have rights too, I continued. I have the right to decide how I feel about your actions with someone else, and I'll be using that right to think about our future. I paused again, looking for a response, but she remained silent. Just so you know, I said casually, I'm thinking our marriage might not last much longer. From where I stand, it feels like you've ended it, and I don't know if we can rebuild it. She looked stunned, her face frozen in disbelief. It seemed she hadn't thought I would consider a separation because of her choices. That surprised me. I knew she was much smarter than this. I just couldn't understand her point of view at all. Since she didn't have an immediate response, I decided to keep talking. So, is that all there is to it? I asked calmly. You have no sense of responsibility and no respect for me as your husband, your partner in this marriage. You didn't even think that husbands and wives shouldn't deceive each other or go behind each other's backs, did you? Nothing at all? She shook her head, and tears began to flow. But I could see they were tears of frustration, not regret. So it's just, if I want to, I can do it, right? I continued. You think you can be with anyone outside our marriage, no matter how I feel or what anyone else thinks? Just I wanted to do it, and I did it because it was fun? That's what you're telling me? She didn't respond. Wow, I said with feigned enthusiasm. That really sums everything up in one messy little package, doesn't it? How dare you? My soon-to-be ex yelled. She was done. She rarely liked being cornered, especially when she had to explain herself. Faye jumped off the couch and headed for the stairs. In her mind, none of this was her fault. I was the immature one, ruining her fun. What I felt was anger. Remember, Faye, I shouted at her retreating figure. You wanted to do it, and you did it because it was fun. Don't forget that. I got up from my chair and walked into the office where my laptop was open on the desk. I had the answers to my questions, I guessed. There was no real regret, maybe a little, but not much. Faye claimed she was sorry for not sharing her actions with me from the start, but I wasn't so sure. Her regret might have been mostly about getting caught. Faye had been hiding things from me for at least 3 months, and I had no idea what was happening. She could be lying about how long it had been, and I had no clue if those people were the first to be involved with her. It seemed likely that Faye was still not being honest. She wanted me to forgive and forget. In fact, they all wanted me to stop being angry. Brianna even offered to share experiences with my wife and me to make up for lost time. Meanwhile, her husband was supposedly okay with not being part of it. It seemed like they wanted everything to go back to normal without facing any consequences. They didn't want anything to come out into the open. They all knew, even if they hadn't talked about it, that their family and most of their friends wouldn't agree with what they were doing. They wanted to keep it a secret, but because of that, I felt like I had to let it be known. I hadn't been completely honest with Faye. I hadn't shared something else I found on those websites where people offer support to those who have been hurt by cheating. The statistics I mentioned were there, but they also suggested revealing the affair to everyone and making sure everyone understood what the cheating partner had been doing. It was supposed to be the first step toward fixing the relationship. I might not have known how to fix my marriage, but I could definitely expose the truth. I had most of what I needed already. I had looked over a short video taken by a drone and knew which parts I wanted to include in a brief clip. There was a moment when Faye looked up at the drone, probably confused about what was happening. Her face then told a lot, and I planned to use that moment at the end of my video. It wasn't even 2:30 yet, so I had plenty of time. I decided to call Mr. Rutherford, the owner of the real estate agency where Faye worked. "Thank you for calling Rutherford Real Estate. How may I help you?" Mr. Rutherford himself answered, and I recognized his voice. It seemed he had given his assistant the afternoon off. "Mr. Rutherford?" I said in a serious tone. "This is Matt Singletary, Faye's husband." "Yes, Matt," he replied warmly. His agency had a great month in sales right before Labor Day last year, and to celebrate he had thrown a picnic at a piece of land he owned outside of town. Everyone involved with the agency and their families attended. We had enjoyed a long chat during that event. "Sir," I started slowly, unsure how to introduce what I needed to say. "Mr. Rutherford, do you have an email address where I can send you something urgent? I need to send you a short video right away on an important matter," I said, trying to sound formal. "Sure, son," he answered. "And call me Martin, okay?" In just a moment, I had his personal email address. I wrote him a message and attached the video I had put together of the afternoon encounter between my wife and his wife. I waited for Martin to open the email and understand what it contained. "My God in heaven," he finally said, clearly shocked. "I'm sorry, Matt," he added gently. "I had no idea." "Neither did I, Martin," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But what I wanted to point out, sir, is that this happened just after noon today. Do you see the date and time stamp in the lower right corner? This was actually going on before that, too. I don't know when this situation started, only when it ended, which was right after the last scene you see there. The key point, sir, is that one of your managers and his wife are involved with my wife while they are supposed to be working. They are doing this on your time and expense." He stayed quiet for a moment. I could tell he suspected this was a serious issue that could lead to legal trouble, and I thought I might have a basis to take action. What this group had done was likely to cause significant distress in my life. Isn't that how many legal cases begin? Since it happened while they were working, Mr. Rutherford's business could face serious consequences, but I hadn't even mentioned taking action. "I'm open to suggestions," he said carefully. "Oh, I don't have any suggestions, sir," I replied. "It's your business, and I'm just bringing some irregularities to your attention. What you do with this information is completely up to you." "I see," he said, sounding a bit unsure. "Absolutely, Mr. Rutherford. I will be getting a divorce, of course, because this situation has wrecked my marriage, but how you handle your employees is your decision." "All right. Well, sir, I need to get off the line and take care of some things. Goodbye, sir, and thank you for your understanding," I told him. Well, goodbye to you as well, Matt. I am truly sorry this has happened. Not your fault, Mr. Rutherford. Some people just lack integrity. Goodbye, sir." I ended the call and moved on to the next thing on my list. I set up a group text message with all of Faye's family, including her brothers and sisters, her parents, as well as her friends and neighbors whose numbers I had. I included the same video clip I had sent to Mr. Rutherford in the group message and sent it out. Then I waited. The truth about these three was about to come to light, and their seemingly perfect world where actions had no consequences was about to change. Faye came down the stairs slowly, pausing at the bottom to steady herself. I sensed she wanted to try to convince me to change my mind. "Honey," she started, "you're making too much of this, baby. Look, we're all adults. A little mistake isn't going to ruin our marriage. I love you, and you know that, right? I would never do anything to hurt you on purpose, dear. I got things mixed up. I understand now that I should have talked to you from the start. I'm truly sorry, and I want to make things right with you in every way I can." I sat back in my chair and waited. I wasn't really listening to her words. Nothing she said could change what had happened. Then the phone in the kitchen rang loudly. Annoyed, Faye glanced over at it but didn't go to answer. "I think you should take that," I said without much feeling. "It's probably for you." Faye moved to the kitchen doorway, picked up the phone, and put it to her ear. "Oh, hi, Dad. I can't talk right now. Can I call you back?" I expected Mr. Rutherford to be the first caller, but her father was quicker. I could hear him yelling even from here. "What are you doing, Faye? What's this video of you with that person out in public?" It wasn't actually a video, but Faye's father was from a different time. Faye turned and looked at me, shocked. She seemed frozen, not even breathing for a moment. It felt like her world was crumbling around her. "Remember what you said, Faye?" I asked, just loud enough for her to hear. "You did what you did because you could, and because it was fun, right?" She stared at me in silence. She was hearing her father's angry voice, but I don't think she understood anything he said. Well, dear, I said, I did what you said. I did it because I could, and let me tell you, it was quite a thrill. I said that last part just to be harsh, as I wasn't feeling very kind. Suddenly, the phone from Mr. Rutherford's office started playing a tune and bounced on the coffee table where it had been left. I picked it up, pressed the accept button, and walked it over to her. Here, this is for you, I said. She took it slowly while her father was still shouting at her through the phone she held in her other hand. Mr. Rutherford was also very upset. Even though Faye didn't have the phone on speaker, I could hear him loud and clear. In a few sharp words, he told her she was fired right then and there, and so was the other person involved. He added that if Faye wanted to collect her last paycheck and things from work, she had better hurry up. She needed to be at the office in 30 minutes, or the doors would be locked and she would not be allowed inside again. He would send everything to her by mail. I turned and stepped out the front door to back my 12-year-old Land Rover up to the porch. I was going to load a lot of my things into it soon, and I wanted to make the distance as short as possible. I didn't mind the marks the big tires would leave in the grass between the driveway and the porch. I didn't live here anymore, so the lawn was no longer my concern. A couple of minutes later, Faye ran out of the front door shouting, "You jerk!" loudly. She repeated it several times before getting into her car, starting it, and driving away fast. I scoffed. My parents had been married for 3 years before I was born, so I definitely was not a jerk. But I really didn't care about her opinions anymore. My phone beeped a few times in quick succession. Because I had sent the video to many people in a group message, their replies were coming in fast. A quick look at some of the texts showed that Faye was getting a lot of criticism from her brother, sisters, and other relatives, friends, and neighbors. I packed up all my clothes and some personal items. They made a small pile that fit easily in the Land Rover. On my last trip through the house to check for anything I might have missed, I put on a holster, checked the .45 caliber Glock Model 38 I usually carried, and tucked it under my shirt. The house now felt unwelcoming. I would carry from now on. When I was done, I called my mom and dad and shared a brief version of what had happened that afternoon. I asked if I could stay with them for a while. Their only question was whether I would arrive in time for dinner or if they should keep something warm in the oven. It felt good to know there was someone I could rely on in the world. Looking back at that day and the week that followed, I was surprised by how quickly things escalated. Cocked pistol, indeed. That's what the armed forces call high-alert operations. With Faye showing no regret, thinking about working on the marriage didn't even slow me down on my decision. It wasn't even a thought on my mind. I didn't spend time debating what I needed to do. Being able to solve problems quickly was one of my most valuable skills at the firm where I worked. Where some people wanted to discuss everything endlessly and think about every possible outcome, I preferred to make decisions and act on them. Most of the time, what I chose turned out well. Sometimes, looking back, I could see I hadn't chosen the best option, but I always felt my choices were better than wasting time. It saved our company both time and money that could have been lost while searching for the perfect answer. Faye thought I was blowing things out of proportion. She believed she could make decisions about our marriage without considering my feelings or how it would affect us. That wasn't fair. I didn't hesitate to choose a path. I followed my instincts. Whether it was right or wrong, I acted on what felt appropriate for me. I heard the saying that there's a thin line between love and hate, and perhaps that's true. I was shocked to see that my love for Faye had dimmed significantly by the end of our talk. Any remaining kindness I felt faded quickly in the days that followed. I remembered loving her, but that feeling was like a sound echoing through mountains. It begins strong, but as it bounces off the rocky slopes, it becomes softer until it disappears entirely. I decided that the best solution was to get a divorce. I wanted to escape the burden of the large house we had bought together, along with Faye's costly car, so we could live our separate lives. My main goal was to ensure we both kept our credit ratings as good as possible. A couple of weeks after I shared my concerns, I called Faye's dad, who was still angry with both of us for what he called my showing off. Eventually, I managed to calm him down and talk about what would be best for Faye and me as individuals. He understood why I didn't want to try to save the marriage, even if Faye was willing. It made sense to sell the house quickly. I could have kept up with the mortgage by living on very little, but I wasn't interested in doing that. I would leave my job and search for rattlesnakes in the Big Bend area before I would pay for a home I never wanted. Faye, as a new real estate agent, had a very small salary and made money only when she sold a property, which hardly ever happened since her commissions went to more experienced agents. After the day, she lost her small income and couldn't keep the house anymore. It wasn't hard to convince Faye's dad that we needed to sell the house quickly. If I ran out of money and stopped paying the mortgage, the house would go into foreclosure. This would hurt both of our credit scores for a long time. The same went for Faye's fancy car. I told her father that I couldn't make the payments for the Lexus, and since Faye couldn't either, we had to sell it fast. We didn't have any equity in the house, and we owed more on the car than it was worth. But making these tough decisions now would help us later, after our marriage ended. Faye's dad agreed with me and managed to convince Faye. I think he made it clear to her that if she didn't go along with the plan, I would just leave, cash out my retirement savings, and disappear, leaving her to sort everything out. In the end, we managed to sell the house fairly quickly. I had to cover some costs for the realtor that I wouldn't usually pay, but it wasn't too bad. I traded in Faye's Lexus for a 6-year-old Ford, paid the extra cost in cash, and gave her the car title. This way she had some transportation, but she would need to pay for insurance and maintenance herself. I felt that was fair for what I could do. When everything was finished, I had the rest of my retirement savings and my share of what little money we had left in our accounts. The best part was that I had no large debts hanging over me. Mission accomplished. We opted for a do-it-yourself divorce since neither of us could afford a lawyer. I completed the paperwork and tried my best to divide our things fairly. I was somewhat surprised when Faye quickly accepted what I'd proposed, especially after how unreasonable she had been before. Someone, likely her dad, had probably explained that arguing over our limited belongings wasn't worth it. Luckily, we hadn't had children, so there was no need to figure out custody or support. Spousal support wasn't an issue either, as we hadn't been married long enough for it to apply. The DIY divorce cost just a couple $100 and had a quick waiting period. So 4 months, 1 week, and a few days after I found out about Faye's actions, the divorce was finalized. I stored away all my feelings and memories from my broken marriage, locked them behind a door in my mind labeled, "Faye Do Not Open," and began the next chapter of my life. That Christmas, not long after I received the final papers, turned out to be quite nice. I spent it with my mom and dad. It was quiet, but really good for the soul. We exchanged gifts, enjoyed a big turkey dinner, and later visited friends and a few relatives. A week into the new year, I decided to leave my job with Reese Donaldson. It was a good place, and I was treated well there. Mr. Donaldson offered me a high salary to stay, thinking I had another job lined up, but I had to say no. I explained that I wasn't looking to move to another company. I just wanted a different path in life. He understood, though not easily, and threw me a great farewell party. He told me to reach out if I ever changed my mind. By Valentine's Day, I found myself without a job, unsure about my future, and surprisingly content with my life. I sat at Mom's kitchen table, watching my dad skillfully carve a mountain lion from a large piece of wood while Mom cooked dinner. Dad was fantastic at wood carving, and Mom could easily have been a chef if she had wanted to. They were both very important to me. Dad wasn't my biological father. He was actually my Uncle Tom, my dad's younger brother. My mom was his wife, Leah. They took me in after my parents died in a car accident when I was 9. Tom and Leah had no children before they took me in, and I was still their only child. One of them wasn't able to have kids. They never wanted to find out why, thinking that knowing could cause blame and hurt in their relationship. They loved each other too much to let that happen. They showered me with kindness and care. Their love helped me cope with losing my parents. It wasn't easy and took time, but eventually I healed. Dad Uncle Tom was known as a tough sheriff when I came to live with them. He worked hard to clean up his county from troublemakers and to keep the peace. He served as sheriff for just over 21 years before he retired. The first time I saw him get emotional was the day he took me to school in his patrol car. I proudly introduced him to everyone at school as my dad, and I truly meant it. Once, Aunt Leah helped with a dance when I was in high school. I made sure to let everyone know I was going to ask my mom to dance before even thinking about asking any of the girls. The girls and teachers thought it was very sweet. To me, it was just a way to show everyone how much I cared about my mom. One evening, when I asked them if they would adopt me, they held each other and cried. Seeing them like that made me cry too. We were really close, and I only thought of them as Mom and Dad. "What we are doing is giving you your inheritance now," Dad said. "Instead of waiting for us to pass away many years from now, you will get it while you are still young enough to use it." He was talking about giving me the ranch. Mom and Dad decided that at their ages of 53 and 51, they wanted to buy a big RV and travel around the country. They already had it and a small car to pull behind it for getting around wherever they parked. They had a plan to visit Glacier National Park first, then the Grand Canyon, and they had a list of other places they wanted to explore. "But Dad," I replied softly, "it's too much. I understand you want to travel, but you need a place to call home, a place to relax when you're tired of being on the road all the time." "Yes, we know that, son. That's why we bought a house in the northern part of the city. It will always be there when we need it. And just between us three, your mom and I, well, we don't really want this place anymore. We never intended to farm or raise animals. We fell into it when I retired from my job. This was just a place to come after I put down my badge, and somehow we never left. Now's our chance, you see?" "Oh, I get it." I pretended to be offended. "You don't want it anymore, so I get the ranch, and I'm stuck here, is that it?" "Nope," Dad said calmly. "The land is worn out and not good for farming anymore, and most of the springs have dried up. So raising animals isn't possible either. But oil companies keep showing interest. A few have already made offers and will come back. This time you can sell and get a good price." I thought it over. The property started out as one big piece of land, 640 acres, plus another 300 acres nearby. My grandpa, my dad's father, bought a piece of land from a widow when he moved here. After a good harvest one year, he got another piece of land nearby. My dad didn't enjoy farming, which is why he chose a career in law enforcement. He never wanted to work long hours on the land. He had been selling off parts of the property whenever he could, and now we only had around 500 acres left from the original piece. The other 300 acres went to a neighboring farmer. "Okay, Dad, I'll do it," I said to him, "but it's a lot. How about I take care of it, sell everything off, and we split the money 3 ways, you, me, and Mom? What do you think?" "How about an 8,020 split, and you update us with emails twice a week and call every Sunday?" my mom chimed in. She walked over from the stove, looking at me seriously. I was balancing on the back 2 legs of my chair, leaning against the wall. She wrapped her arms around my head and kissed my forehead. "We love you, son," she said softly. "Please let us help with this." I looked at Dad. He was back to his carving and didn't notice me. He didn't even respond. He didn't need to. My mom was in charge of the discussion now, and Dad knew I couldn't say no to her. I tried to negotiate a bit. "How about a 5,050 split? I can text you and email often and call on Sundays, holidays, and birthdays too," I suggested. "Deal," Mom agreed right away. "Now put that chair down on all 4 legs and go get ready for dinner," she instructed. She glanced at my dad. "Tom." Dad had already picked up his carving tools and was heading out to the garage where he kept his things. I hurried to wash up and help Mom set the table. That's how it was in early April, the year after I found out about Faye. I stood on the front porch of my parents' old home and watched them drive their new RV slowly up the gravel road toward the highway 3 miles away. The long vehicle had all kinds of comforts inside, including a shower and a queen-sized bed. They were towing a small vehicle behind so they could park the RV and explore local sites, towns, or whatever they felt like doing each day. When they reached the top of the hill a mile away and disappeared down the other side, I sighed and went back inside my house, which didn't feel like home anymore. From the outside, it looked like a typical worn-out farmhouse built around 1930. With his experience in law enforcement, Dad wanted to make sure our home was safe from any troublemakers. Inside, the house had everything we needed. The living room featured a large TV, and Dad had installed a top-off-the-line sound system. The furniture was big, soft, and inviting. The rest of the house was just as cozy. At the back of the house, Dad built a spacious wooden deck with a grill and smoker made from local stone since he and Mom loved to barbecue. We also had a nice pool that was big enough for diving and for Mom to swim laps. Mom used to be on the swim team in high school and still enjoyed swimming for exercise. A few days after they left, I finished counting everything in the house, including the farm tools and the animals. I had 14 horses, 23 buffalo, and 47 longhorn cattle. Grandpa once dreamed of creating a nature park. I also had to deal with everything in both barns on the property. I started selling off as much as I could, but I kept the house furniture. The first item I sold was a big John Deere tractor, which I parked by the gate along the highway. I got a pretty good price for it, which was a win for both me and the farmer who bought it. I thought I could sell the rest in a similar way, and it worked out well. The road was busy with folks who farmed or ranched for a living, and if they didn't want something, they knew someone who did. Before long, the farm equipment was selling quickly. In May, on a Friday, I received a call on the house phone. At first, I thought it might be Mom since it was her turn to call. "Howdy! How y'all doing?" I said cheerfully. "Good afternoon, is this Mr. Singletary?" It wasn't Mom, and I didn't like the way the young woman spoke to me, as if she was doing me a favor. I remembered a trick Dad would use when he was working as a sheriff. He would pretend to have a strong accent and act a bit silly to catch tough suspects off guard. They usually didn't notice until it was too late. "Yes, I said in a slow drawl. "This here's Matt Singletary, his own self. Please hold for Mr. Wingate." The line went silent, so I hung up. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. "Mr. Singletary?" the same woman asked, sounding a bit annoyed. "Yep, I surely am," I replied. "Are you still in contact with that guy, Winslate?" I asked, pretending to be curious. No, Mr. Singletary, I wanted you to hold on. Not. Oh, I'm really sorry, but I can't do that. I only keep close to women. I just don't think it's right for a man to be holding on to another man, you know." There was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of a surprised breath taken in, and then let out by the young woman. No, sir. What I meant to ask if you could wait just a minute so I could get Mr. Wingate, on the phone. Would you mind doing that?" "Oh, sure. Yes, ma'am, I can do that. How far do you have to go to reach him?" I asked with interest. "He'll be with you shortly," she replied, avoiding my question. I wasn't sure if she was about to laugh or if she was holding back frustration. Either way, she sounded much more relaxed now. It actually took longer than shortly. I figured she was probably explaining our earlier conversation to Mr. Wingate so he would understand what was going on. "Good afternoon, Mr. Singletary. I'm George Wingate with Christopher Stamp and Presley. How are you today, sir?" "I'm doing just fine. Really good," I told him. "And how are Christy, Bump, and Elvis doing?" I thought I heard a soft laugh from a woman on the line, but I wasn't sure. We are all doing very well. Thank you for asking, Tom. May I call you Tom?" "Well, sir, I guess you can if you want," I replied. "But my real name's Matt, so I don't know why you'd want to call me Tom. Actually, it's Matthew. That's my given name. But folks call me Matt. My friends do anyway." Okay," Mr. Wingate said. "Can I please speak to Tom? Please." "No," I answered firmly. There was a pause. "May I ask why not?" Wingate asked. I could tell he was a bit annoyed. "He's not here," I replied. There was another silence. Before Mr. Wingate could say anything else, I decided I had taken this short answer thing as far as I could. Honestly, I was starting to feel a bit bored with it. "My dad gave me the whole ranch, signed it right over to me, and then he left for a trip who knows where. He and my mom both. Do you want me to pass along a message when I hear from them?" "Well, no. It sounds like you might be the person we need to speak to. Your father transferred the title to you, did he?" I hadn't used Dad at any point, so I knew he was trying to get under my skin. I couldn't help but smile. "Yes, sir, he sure did," I told the pretentious Mr. Wingate. "Wingate." "Yes, well, Matt," he continued, "a team from SunCloud Petroleum was near your land a few days ago. They noticed you are selling some of your farming equipment, and we were wondering if—" "Oh, I'm really sorry, but the John Deere is already sold to Mr. Jenkins down by Whisper Lake," I interrupted. "Same goes for the hay baler and the big plow, but I have a bunch of other things I could sell you if you're interested." "No," Wingate interrupted me firmly. He paused for a moment. "Matt, we were actually hoping to set up a meeting with you to talk about selling your ranch. That's what you are doing, right? We represent SunCloud, and I assure you we would offer a very fair price for your land. Can we offer you a round-trip ticket to Oklahoma City from your nearest airport? We can discuss everything in detail then." "Why would I want to go to Oklahoma City?" I asked, feeling confused. Well, that's where SunCloud and our office are based, Mr. Singletary. Oh, really? I laughed. You had me worried for a second, I told him. But I can't fly on those airplanes. I get really sick if I try, I explained. Why don't you and whoever else you want to bring just come over to my house whenever it works for you? After he thought about it for a bit, I guess he started looking at his schedule. Maybe he had the young woman I spoke to earlier check other dates too. I wasn't sure, but there was a long pause. Eventually, he returned and we agreed that the following Thursday would work for them to come over and meet with me. I'm sure it was so they could easily persuade me. I had a feeling his idea of a fair price was one that would favor him and the oil company. I took a break before calling my lawyer, who specialized in selling big properties. He was knowledgeable about land and mineral rights, and I already had him on retainer and ready to help. In the middle of June, we had our third meeting with Mr. Wingate and several lawyers from the law firm representing SunCloud Petroleum. Sitting next to me was my lawyer, along with several other attorneys who were listening through his laptop's camera. I never saw them, but they could hear everything. They only spoke to my lawyer through a small earpiece. I almost introduced my lawyer as Jed Clampett to the people Wingate brought with him, but I thought that might be a little too much. I held back from calling the swimming pool the cement pond, even though I was really tempted to do so. I didn't want to give away my thoughts, and even someone as clueless as Wingate might notice. The meeting was going well from my perspective. Wingate's law firm, representing SunCloud Petroleum, had made better offers during our previous meetings and calls. In their last conversation, they had presented an offer that made Carl Patterson, my lawyer, smile with satisfaction. Carl seemed ready to play a character and was a little disappointed when I refused to go along. But that was fine. Carl believed the amount they were willing to put in my bank was about as high as it would get. I agreed, and we arranged this final meeting to sign the papers. There were no last-minute issues, and I could tell Wingate and his team were eager to complete this deal. All right then, I said, pretending to check the sales documents. Patterson had already approved everything, and his knowledge was far greater than mine, so I was just practicing my acting skills. You all agree to let me sit right here for 181 days after today to finish selling all the furniture and other items, correct? That's right, Matt, Wingate replied with a reassuring tone. You have 6 months and 1 day? Great, let's get this done, I said, dropping the fake accent, though Wingate didn't seem to notice. I picked up the pen offered by one of Wingate's young assistants and signed my name where she pointed on the stacks of legal documents. It took a while since there were 2 copies of everything, with many pages needing signatures. Sherry Woodward was Wingate's paralegal helping me out. Besides being quite charming, I thought she was much smarter than her boss. Earlier, when she first arrived, she had wandered around admiring everything. I noticed how she appreciated the modern appliances, the well-kept home, and the polished hardwood floors. She was also impressed by the neat pool and deck outside. When she noticed my framed degree in business management on the living room wall, along with my MBA right next to it, she tilted her head in surprise. None of this fit the image of a simple-minded person that I was trying to project to Mr. Wingate. She stepped away from the kitchen door leading to the pool, just as she seemed ready to share a thought or two with Wingate, when he suddenly directed her to grab something from his briefcase in the SUV. I couldn't hear what was said, but she was told to bring it to him right away. He had spoken with a lot of arrogance, using words that I'm sure would not have sat well with me if he had used them on me. When she returned, Miss Woodward did not whisper anything in Wingate's ear. Sherry Woodward was standing close to me, leaning slightly to help me turn the pages and point out where I needed to sign. Up close, she was even more charming than from a distance. I noticed she was quite slender and looked great in her outfit. She smelled nice, too. I didn't mind her being so close. It felt comfortable. When I reached the last signature, I looked up at her and winked. Wingate and his colleagues were too far away to notice. Sherry had to hold back a laugh with a pretend cough, covering her mouth with her hand. It was all finished. I returned the pen to her and gave my copy of the documents to my lawyer. Then I waited. We had arranged with Wingate's group to transfer the money to my bank as soon as I signed everything. This was unusual, but since I wasn't very experienced with business matters, they agreed. I had also set things up with my bank to handle the money quickly after it arrived. I suspected Wingate might not be very trustworthy. My lawyer turned his laptop around for me to enter my password and hit the enter key. The funds from Wingate's team were quickly sent to another account, and the original account was closed. Maybe I was being too cautious. Maybe they wouldn't try to reclaim the money just because one of their own felt a little embarrassed. But sometimes, caution is wise. You never know when someone might not have good intentions. Well, it's been interesting working with you, Mr. Wingate, I said, thinking of him as old numbnuts. I extended my hand as I stood up. Just for your information, Mr. Wingate, not everyone who speaks with a Texas accent is lacking in intelligence. Sometimes it's just a way of talking. I could see that he started to understand. And just so you know, I added with a smile, I would have gladly sold you the property for half of what you just paid if you hadn't acted so arrogantly. I knew word would spread in his firm about our interaction. There were too many people from the firm in the room, and I was pretty sure not all of them were truly loyal to him. I already knew of at least one. I realized it was a bit petty and childish, but it felt good. They all walked out the door to their big black SUVs, some of them trying not to smile. One guy barely held it together until Wingate closed his backseat door, then he let a big smile show. Sherry lingered a moment and stopped just inside the door, so I whispered an invitation for dinner. She nodded and gave me a slip of paper with her phone number and the name of the hotel where they were staying. Sherry and I had a lovely evening. I took her to the best restaurant in town because I could afford it now. After that, we went to a nightclub in the city that had a mix of music, including slow dancing, which was so much fun with Sherry. When we returned to my home, we talked about Mr. Wingate for a long time. Well, we did that over breakfast, actually. We were occupied when we first came back from the club. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life from then on, but I was certain that flying would be part of it. I took refresher courses to reactivate my pilot's certificate, including an instrument ground school, and flew with an instructor for a while to get back in shape. My Uncle Jake, my mom's older brother who taught me how to fly, had passed away 6 years ago and left all his belongings to my mom. This included 5 small planes parked behind what we called the North Barn, about 3/4 of a mile from the house. I hired a group of aircraft mechanics to work part-time fixing all 5 to get them ready for inspection. It didn't take long. I was paying them well, so they had plenty of free time to work on my planes. The 5 single-engine planes passed inspection easily, and I started selling them to dealers, except for one that I sold to a man with a private pilot's certificate who wanted to fly more without high rental costs. I gave him a special deal because he reminded me of myself. I didn't make much money selling Uncle Jake's planes, but I wasn't expecting to. Finally, I had just one plane left, and I wasn't even trying to sell it. I loved taking it up for an hour or two, just me and the plane. I was sitting at a picnic table in the shade of a big pecan tree, outside what looked like an old building with a small sign out front simply saying, Jesse's. To the locals who visited the place, no further explanation was needed. Jesse was an elderly black man who seemed like he had just been freed from a difficult life on a plantation. No one knew his exact age, but it didn't matter. Jesse served the best barbecue around, known only to the locals and a few visitors from the city. Late August in Texas is hot for sure, but just before noon, with a nice breeze under the tall pecan trees, it was quite comfortable. A light, tasty smoke rose from the smokers in the back, making people hungry for miles. Despite how it looked from the outside, the place was very clean, and you could easily eat off the floors. I visited often since it was on the best road between the city and my parents' home, my home now. It was still strange for me to think of it as mine. Today, I wasn't heading anywhere in particular. I just really wanted some of Texas's famous brisket, so I borrowed Uncle Jake's old plane, a Cessna 172, to get to Jesse's. There was a big stretch of grass beside the well-kept area around his business, and he was perfectly fine with me landing there. Outside, there were several picnic tables under the trees, and I was sitting at one, enjoying the day and a delicious lunch. I was finishing a large brisket sandwich with some barbecue sauce dripping down, along with tasty borracho beans and mustard potato salad. As I ate, I thought about going back inside for a slice of pecan pie that Jesse made fresh every day. I figured I was working hard and burning off the calories, so a little pie wouldn't hurt at all. That was my plan, and it made sense to me. I wasn't paying too much attention to what was happening around me. I noticed the cars passing by on the old road to my left, but I didn't really look. The heat waves rising off the asphalt were distracting. I did notice when a few cars filled with young people arrived, but I didn't feel like checking them out, even though I could hear some lively voices. Even though I was just over 30, I didn't feel I had much in common with those who were much younger. I focused on my meal while glancing at the entrance to Jesse's place. The brisket melting in my mouth was taking up most of my thoughts, along with mouth-watering images of pecan pie. I heard voices from 2 tables of young professionals, but I didn't pay much attention until one comment stood out. "You're just going to go over there and sit with that cowboy?" said a voice I didn't recognize. "Really? What if—" Someone else responded in disbelief. That caught my interest. I was wearing an old pair of cargo shorts, a faded blue shirt, and sturdy hiking boots, topped off with a cream-colored Stetson hat, common in rural Texas. I looked around to see if anyone else was the subject of that remark. "He's my ex-husband," another voice interrupted, cutting off the chatter. I recognized that voice. I turned my head slightly to see my ex-wife confidently walking toward me. My first thought, an unkind one, I admit, was, "Oh no, what does she want?" She stopped a few feet away from my table. "I know you probably don't want to see me," she began, "but could I sit and talk for a minute?" I set down my half-eaten brisket sandwich and took off my sunglasses so she could see my eyes. My mom taught me that was polite, and it came naturally now. "I don't want to hold any hard feelings, Faye," I said softly. Her friends were close enough to hear if I spoke louder, and I didn't think our conversation was their concern. "I don't blame you if you do," she sighed, sitting down on the bench beside me. "I really made some mistakes back then." I stayed silent. It was true, but I didn't feel the need to go over it again. She already knew how I felt. After a moment, she took off her sunglasses and placed them on the table, revealing her bright green eyes. "How have you been, Matt?" she asked, breaking the short silence. "I've been doing pretty well, thanks," I answered with a light tone. "And you?" "I'm good. I'm taking night classes, but you already know that. Dad said he told you. I'll be starting next semester at UT to become a physician's assistant." "That's great," I replied. "I'm glad things seem to be improving." I didn't know what else to add. I wasn't really interested in her life anymore. It wasn't my job to support her. "So I want to say I'm sorry for what I did, and I hope you can forgive me someday," Faye said softly. "I don't hate you at all, Faye," I interrupted. "I've already forgiven you." I paused for a moment. "I just don't have the energy to hold on to that kind of feeling. It would just weigh me down and wouldn't help me. Life is too short for that." "Thank you," she replied, leaning a bit closer to me. "I'm seeing a counselor," she added quietly. I nodded to show I was listening. "We're making some progress," she continued. "She's helping me understand that my choices affect many people, not just me. If I knew how bad things could get, I wouldn't have done what I did, and I truly regret the trouble I caused you." I frowned, uncomfortable with my thoughts. I shifted slightly on the hard bench. Faye noticed my reaction and looked a bit annoyed. "What?" she asked, sounding a little defensive. "I'm trying to apologize and be better. I know I shouldn't have acted that way before." "Faye, I just think your counselor might not be helping you enough if this is all you're learning," I replied. "Maybe it's just the starting point, and she has more to teach you." I paused to think about how to explain. "When you say you wouldn't do something because of the consequences, it feels like you're worried about the punishment, rather than really understanding why the action is wrong." Her expression darkened more, probably upset with my comments about her growth. "But Faye," I added gently, "that's like weighing risks. It sounds like you're saying you'll avoid something just to escape trouble." I shifted position on the bench, getting ready to leave soon. I once read that integrity is doing what's right even when no one is watching. I just don't believe. Until you and your counselor reach a point where the urge to stray from your marriage feels completely wrong, you might find yourself tempted again someday. You could think that the consequences won't be too bad or that no one will see you so you won't get in trouble. Do you understand? She took a deep breath. She was still annoyed, but maybe she was starting to listen. It was hard to tell. "For me," I continued, "there are temptations every day for everyone. We're human and we make mistakes. Unless someone instinctively chooses to ignore a temptation without even thinking about it. It can lead to problems, often serious ones like this. She looked at me with a mix of anger and frustration, ready to escalate the conversation. Well, I guess I'm not as perfect as some people, she replied sharply. She pulled back, biting her lip. Her expression softened and she seemed to calm down a bit. She shook her head, took a deep breath, and released it slowly. I loved you, Matt, she said, changing the subject. Whether you believe me or not, I really did. And I loved you, I responded. I showed it by never being unfaithful. If she could show her anger, so could I. She looked away, clearly uncomfortable. But telling my mom and dad and my family you think that's love? I scoffed. Isn't that a bit like blaming the messenger, Faye? I just pointed out what you and your friends were doing. It was like turning over a rock and seeing what was hiding underneath. I could feel my frustration rising. I took a deep, deliberate breath and tried to relax my shoulders. As for what happened, I said more calmly, I was just following your lead. She frowned and raised her eyebrows. Remember, Faye? You said you acted the way you did because you could and because it was enjoyable. Well, I did the same. Do you know how difficult it's been for me since you told everyone? Faye started defending herself again. That wasn't something I thought about. I interrupted her. You didn't consider my feelings and you didn't think about what I would go through, did you? She lowered her head and didn't answer. Suddenly I felt done with the conversation. This was painful, and I didn't see the point in going over things that were better left in the past. I put my sunglasses back on, extended my left foot, and stood up. Faye, I might be out of line for bringing all this up. It was just on my mind. Maybe the counselor was going to guide us toward a better understanding of everything sooner or later. I hope I haven't messed up her plans. And I need to head out now. Enjoy your lunch, okay? It was nice to see you. I took a step back to clear the picnic table, then paused and looked back at Faye. Faye, I truly did care about you, but one afternoon changed everything for me. There's nothing left. I only hold on to the memory of loving you. I'm sorry, I wish it could be different, but that's how it is. Goodbye, Faye. I turned left and walked along the low wall behind the picnic area. After passing it, I turned again and walked confidently toward the gate that led out onto the open prairie and to my little plane. I threw away the rest of my meal in the nearby trash can. I wasn't hungry anymore, not even for that delicious piece of pecan pie I had been looking forward to. I knew I would miss it later. I would regret leaving before enjoying my treat, but I had enough of my ex-wife for now forever, and I wanted to be somewhere far away from her. When I first thought about flying from the ranch to Jesse's to avoid a long drive on winding Texas roads, I tried to find the owner of the land next to Jesse's. I wanted permission to land my plane there, but I never found the woman listed in the county records. So I decided to use the open field as my makeshift runway and promised to deal with any issues if they came up. If the owner ever complained, I would stop using the land and apologize sincerely. Jesse's place was separated from the vast prairie by a barbed wire fence that had a gate about 15 feet long, not far from Jesse's main entrance. The gate was likely put in place for moving livestock. It was made of sturdy steel, and while the steel itself hadn't rusted, the hinges and latch needed some work. When I first thought about flying to Jesse's, I checked the gate and noticed the issues. I bought replacement parts and spent most of a day fixing it up. Now there was a nice, wide gate that opened smoothly and closed securely. A woman was leaning against the gate, resting her hands on the top bar. She had beautiful, shiny black hair that flowed down her back. I felt a strong desire to run my fingers through it. She was of average height, around 5 feet 6 inches, and had a slender build. She had toned legs and delicate ankles, which I couldn't help but notice. I've always appreciated good legs, and I could really see how lovely hers were. As soon as a girl finishes high school, her body starts to change, especially if she has a curvy figure. However, if a woman stays active and takes care of herself, she can maintain her shape for many years. As I got closer, I noticed her figure was nicely shaped, full but not too much. I smiled, feeling grateful for the moment, letting go of memories of a frustrating conversation with my ex-wife. I positioned myself a little to her left, wanting to avoid giving her the impression of being too forward. It's a Cessna, I started to explain the plane's model and its speed, but she interrupted me. It's a tiny airplane, the woman with lovely dark hair told me, turning to meet my gaze. She pushed her sunglasses down and looked at me over them. Her bright blue eyes were captivating and seemed to enjoy the moment. It really is, I smiled back. It has barely enough room for a couple of seats and doesn't go as fast as the race cars at the track, but it flies straight and gets to places quicker than a car. I realized I was talking a lot, but I couldn't help it with such a charming lady in front of me. I couldn't stop smiling. She was just as beautiful when facing me as when I first saw her from behind, looking out at the landscape. I focused on her eyes, but I could notice her figure was well defined. She wasn't wearing much, and it was easy to see she looked great. With her dark hair and light skin, I guessed she had Mexican roots. But those blue eyes hinted at some Irish heritage. It seemed that her background blended beautifully, and I was eager to get to know her better. I noticed she didn't have a ring on her finger. We chatted for a while about the airplane, the sky, and the barbecue, whatever came to mind. I felt proud that I was able to keep the conversation going without making a blunder. "You're a pilot?" she asked. "I am," I replied. "You don't look like a pilot," she said, giving me a quick glance from head to toe. "My pilot uniform is at the cleaners right now," I joked, "along with my superhero costumes." She lightly tapped my arm, and I realized we were inching closer to each other. I really didn't know what to expect, but the way she touched my arm made me feel something special. I wanted to know her better. "I really am a pilot," I said. "I just flew down from the ranch to get some of Jesse's barbecue because I love it and have been dreaming about it for the last few days." I smiled, feeling happy. "It is good," she replied, nodding her head. "Do you want to go for a ride?" I asked cheerfully. "A ride?" she repeated. "You want me to go for a ride in your little airplane?" she said playfully. It seemed like she had been waiting for this moment, which made me think we might be on the same page. I really wanted to get to know her more. "Of course," I answered. "I have a Mustang at the ranch. We can be there in 20 minutes in the plane. I'd love to see you on her with your beautiful hair flowing in the wind." I meant every word. I could picture it clearly. She looked into my eyes for a moment before turning away and walking back to her friends. "Julie!" she called out. Her voice was strong. I was sure the truck drivers a mile away could hear her. Julie heard her loud and clear. A short, lively brunette stepped away from the group and walked a few steps toward us. "Throw me my stuff! I'm going on a plane ride!" my girl shouted. That seemed to mean a lot to Julie, as a leather purse quickly flew through the air, landing just a few feet in front of my future co-pilot. I was impressed by how strong the brunette was. After she picked up the purse, my girl strutted back to me, holding it under her arm. She took her phone out and was focused on the screen. She tapped a couple of buttons and then pressed it to her ear. A small cloud of dust from where the purse hit the ground started to settle. "Stevie?" she said to whoever was on the line. "Mercy. Hey, I'm going on a plane ride with Cowboy. Yeah, a plane ride. And we'll see his ranch, okay?" Mercy, huh? We hadn't introduced ourselves yet, so I was curious. I still didn't know who Stevie was, but I recognized Julie as the girl with the impressive throw. "Yeah, I'll be fine." She looked up at me with a smile. "It'll be fun. Cowboy is really nice. No, you don't know him. He's..." I could sense that someone was asking the girl, Mercy, about who she was going away with. I stepped closer, grinning because I enjoyed being near her. She smelled wonderful. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket, took out my pilot certificate, and showed it to her. "Yes, I know. Hold on. I do know, yes. Stephanie. Stop talking, please," she said, clearly frustrated. "Listen, Mommy, can you write this down? I know you worry about me, but just listen, okay? Do you have something to write with?" There was a short pause. Mercy rolled her eyes and swayed her head while waiting. She took off her sunglasses to read the card better. She had stunning blue eyes and a cute nose with a few freckles, high cheekbones, and a nice smile. I could see her face better now that the glasses were off. "Okay, his name is Matthew James Singletary." "Uh-huh, Matthew. And his pilot's license?" "Certificate," I whispered to correct her. "His private pilot certificate number is 5,555,555 inches. She quickly moved on after my correction. I appreciated how smart she was. She listened again. "Yeah, that's it. If something were to happen to me and the police need to find Cowboy, they would know who to look for, because he wears a big cowboy hat." Then my beautiful friend, Mercy, handed the phone back to her roommate Stephanie for a bit. "No, I don't know yet. I'll call you later, okay?" She closed her eyes for a moment, listening carefully. "Okay, Mommy, I'll be careful. Love you too, bye." Mercy pressed the end call button and put her phone away. I led her through the gate, glancing back at the picnic table where I had been with Faye. She was gone, and I couldn't spot her right away among the crowd. I didn't search too hard. I was focused on putting Faye in a safe place in my thoughts. "Mercy, do you always talk to your mom like that?" I asked with a smile as I opened the gate. "That was not my mom," she replied quickly. "That was my roommate Stephanie," she explained. "But sometimes she acts just like my mom." "Well, that shows she cares," I said, closing the gate after she passed through. "She calls me Mercy, Merci, because she heard my real mom call me that once. It's a short form of Mercedes," she told me. I thought about her name as we walked to the passenger door of the old Cessna 172. "Mercedes," I said slowly, enjoying how it sounded as she got into the passenger seat. "Do you mind if I call you Mercedes instead of Mercy? It's a lovely name." "It seems unique and fits you well," I said as I closed the cockpit door for her. I didn't want to check if she was okay with me using her full name, but she didn't say anything, so it seemed fine. I took the blocks away from the left wheel, put them in the storage area, and shut the door. Then I climbed into my seat. I handed her the headset for the passenger side, set it to intercom, started the engine, and let it run for a few minutes while I adjusted my headset and chatted with her to test the intercom. I drove away from the fence on the big tires of the plane's landing gear, aimed the old aircraft into the wind, and pushed the throttle. In no time, we were in the air. One reason I loved this Cessna was how quick it was, and I turned in a wide circle to the right. Soon we were flying over Jesse's restaurant where a group of people had come with Faye. The young woman with dark hair was waving wildly at them from the right seat. I made a wider turn so they could see her and wave back. I straightened out for a moment, flying south. Then I turned around again and went over Jesse's place once more. I rocked the wings a few times as a goodbye and began to climb higher. I took a direction towards the ranch that my parents had left me. We should arrive in about 20 minutes. I leveled off at a safe height, avoiding any risks from birds but low enough to stay off radar. As we flew, we chatted. "So," I said casually, "if you don't mind me saying, miss, Mercedes, you're the first person I've met with such striking blue eyes." She looked at me quickly. "Well, first of all, I'm not Hispanic or Latina," she replied with some heat, a slight frown on her face. "My apologies," I responded while glancing her way. "I didn't mean to upset you." She stared at me for a moment, then smiled. "You are speaking with a proud Cheyenne maiden. The Cheyenne people are Native American, not Hispanic or Latino." I admired her features for a moment and smiled back. "Okay, Miss Cheyenne Princess. In a history project, I read journals from mountain men of the early 1800s, and I didn't recall any mentioning blue-eyed Cheyenne maidens." I paused to check the instruments before refocusing on flying. "So, come on, there must be some Celtic ancestry in your Cheyenne Princess background somewhere." Mercedes playfully stuck out her tongue, but she was clearly enjoying the conversation. "All right," she said with a big grin. "I might have a mom who's Irish on both sides of her family. Happy now?" she joked. "Ah," I said, trying to seem wise, or at least close to it. "So Dad found a lost Irish girl wandering around in Cheyenne, Wyoming, huh?" "Nope. Philadelphia," she shot back. "Mom claims it was her idea. She says she spotted a wandering Cheyenne warrior and captured him fair and square. Now she feels sorry for him and he's all hers." I laughed, picturing the playful banter between her parents. My own mom and dad often joke like that too. "I think I'd really enjoy buying your parents a cup of coffee and sitting down with them for a nice chat. They sound like wonderful people," I said, gently patting her hand before going back to the controls. I liked the way her hand felt. It was nice and graceful. She could have been a hand model for all I knew. Her skin felt soft. Mercedes brought up Faye. She had heard Faye tell everyone I was her ex. I shared a bit about why Faye and I divorced and what we talked about at Jesse's. I told her I had put the memories of my marriage in a small part of my mind, and I felt good about that. I also told Mercedes I didn't think it was wrong to invite her on a plane ride in front of Faye. My ex-wife was just another person to me, like anyone else at that table. Mercedes explained that, Julie was a second cousin on her mom's side. Julie had invited her and Stephanie to Texas for a little getaway before their dance troupe prepared for a fall and winter tour in Europe. Julie, she said, worked with Faye but didn't know her well. I admitted I didn't know Faye very well either, and we moved on from that topic. Mercedes asked how I learned to fly, and I told her about my Uncle Jake, how he had taught me the basics and helped me fly solo when I was just 15. Flying became one of my favorite hobbies. We then talked about anything that popped into our heads. My navigation was spot on. In fact, the ranch appeared on the horizon much sooner than I expected. I was having a great time talking with this nice, Cheyenne girl. I lined up with the familiar stretch of land I used as a runway and explained to Mercedes how we go downwind and upwind. After we flew downwind and made a sharp turn to the right, I carefully landed the old Cessna smoothly on the runway. I then taxied close to the big barn, where we stored the wheel chocks and tie-downs. We secured the aircraft against any strong winds. This was Texas, after all, with its wide-open spaces and strong winds. Mercedes helped where she could, and once we were done, I led her through a breezy area in the barn to where we could see the house sitting 100 yards away. "Okay," she said, looking around. She pointed at the house where my Range Rover was parked by the back porch. "Where's this Mustang you mentioned?" "Oh, right over here," I replied, quickly changing direction toward the area where a small group of horses stood near the corral. They noticed us and looked eager, as if hoping for a treat. I didn't have any goodies with me, but they didn't know that. "There she is," I said, pointing to a 3-year-old sorrel horse that was prancing around, clearly enjoying the attention. "Hey, Ginger," I called, holding out my hand. She came over, nudging my palm, looking for something sweet. "Mercedes, meet Ginger. Ginger, this is Miss Mercedes, our Cheyenne warrior princess, and a really nice person." I introduced them. Ginger tossed her head and sniffed. Meanwhile, Mercedes was trying to hold back her laughter. "What's funny?" I asked, puzzled. I quickly checked myself to make sure everything was in place, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. "I thought you said you had a Mustang," she explained, giggling. "I do," I said. "That's her. She was running free with a small herd in Nevada before she was captured a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how she made it down here, but she's a true Mustang. There aren't many left anymore." Mercedes giggled again. "I thought you meant a Mustang, like a car. You know, vroom, vroom," she said, making car noises. I laughed. "Not at all. Why did you think I wanted to see you on her, like riding her?" "I thought that's just how cowboys talked," she admitted with a smile. I couldn't help but smile back. I appreciated her sense of humor and that she wasn't easily offended. I really liked that about her. "Nah," I said, "but I would love to see you riding her fast with your beautiful hair flowing behind you." Then I had a thought. "You do ride, right, Cheyenne Maiden?" I asked. She had mentioned being from Philadelphia on the flight, and I wondered if many women there had ever been on a horse. "I do," she replied with a big smile. "I spent summer vacations with Grandpa running elk, you know," she explained. "But I'm not going on a ride in these," she said with a frown, looking down at her shorts. "They would be too uncomfortable. I wouldn't be able to walk for a long time." That was true. She would definitely be uncomfortable, and I completely agreed with her decision not to ride in those shorts. I didn't want her to feel that way at all. So riding in that outfit wasn't an option. I thought for a moment. There had to be a way to solve this problem. An idea was in my head, but I couldn't quite catch it. I decided to let it go for now. I smiled at her, feeling a warm connection. I was starting to really like her playful smile. Then a thought came to me. "What is your Cheyenne name?" I asked, curious. She glanced at me quickly to see if I was serious. When she saw I really wanted to know, she smiled. "It's like, little dove that calls in the morning," she said, looking at my reaction. I tilted my head as I thought about the name, only to discover I was genuinely considering its meaning. After a moment, I nodded slowly while smiling. "That's very nice," I said. "It's a lovely name for a lovely person." She liked my response and gave my chest a friendly pat. I hadn't even noticed how close we were as we talked, and it felt really nice. We stopped by my parents' old house to grab some water bottles and then went exploring. We drove across the land, searching for the small herd of longhorn cattle that I thought would be near a spring that never dried up. The vast prairie beyond my ranch made our small piece of land seem tiny. No one seemed to know who owned all that grass, and it appeared to have been returned to public control. But since no one ever came to ask us to keep our animals from grazing there, I made use of it. The Longhorns could be anywhere near the spring. We quickly found it, and while Mercedes walked around, I took a moment to clean up the area a bit. After that, we headed a few miles north and then west around a hill where we spotted the cattle making their way back to the spring we had just left. We parked and watched the cattle as they moved slowly. Mercedes was amazed by how wide the horns were on those animals. To keep the conversation going, I shared some facts about longhorn cattle and a bit about the history of the area, including some old ruins near the hill. She expressed interest in seeing the ruins someday. I promised I would take her. I told her about the buffalo, but they were far away, probably in another direction since they didn't get along with the longhorns. The afternoon was getting late. We started back to the house, talking about different things, nothing special, just friendly chatting. The shadows grew longer as we arrived back at the old homestead. I drove around the house, showing her the swimming pool and jacuzzi in the backyard. Then we drove a short way down the hill towards the county road so I could show Mercedes the little house where my parents let me live from when I was 15 until I went to college. I also pointed out the field nearby. It was now overgrown and the plowed lines were almost flat. I shared with her how I had walked across that field many times as a kid. When I got older, I began to run across it to stay active, and I was sure I got my exercise just from walking back and forth. When we reached the front porch of the main house, I turned off the engine but didn't open my door right away. "Ah, Mercedes, I really don't want to take you back to town. I'm having the best time with you. But I don't want you to feel stuck here or anything, so if you'd prefer, we can head back to town. I could have you home in time for dinner." She looked at me for a moment, searching my eyes. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to fire up the grill and make you steak and salad for dinner," I replied quickly. "Then maybe we'll swim in the pool and later look up at the stars when it gets dark while we hear the coyotes howling," I said all at once. Mercedes studied my face and then smiled softly. She turned to reach into her back pocket for her phone. "Stevie," she said. "Hi. Just so you know, I'm not coming back tonight, okay?" "Yeah, I'm staying out here at the ranch. I don't know, maybe tomorrow, or the next day. Everything is good. I'll call you tomorrow. Bye." She turned back to me. "Cowboy Matt," she said earnestly. "I really need to find that nice bathroom you showed me earlier." I was starting to really like her smile. "Of course," I replied, grabbing the door handle. "Last one inside has to wait," I yelled playfully. She laughed and tried to get her door open. We hurried up the 4 big steps to the porch, and I pushed the door open as fast as I could. She was giggling while trying to grab my arm or anything to slow me down, but I had the advantage. I reached the downstairs bathroom first, but quickly dashed down the hall to run upstairs to the bigger bathroom. I grew up with the saying, "ladies before gentlemen," and I followed it or my mom would give me a hard time. I heard the bathroom door slam downstairs, and then there was silence. I was focused on getting my jeans undone. I didn't realize how nervous I felt until I noticed I was having trouble calming down. I can cook on the stove, but I prefer grilling outside. Mercedes enjoyed healthy foods, so we shared the cooking tasks. While I started the grill and cooked the steaks, Mercedes looked for fresh vegetables and made a lovely salad. She mixed a nice vinaigrette dressing to go with it. She brought the salad to the deck and set up our plates and utensils while I worked on the steaks. Sometimes we bumped into each other as we moved around, playfully avoiding collisions. Occasionally we would touch each other's shoulders or arms as we chatted about little things. It had been a long time since I enjoyed moments like this with someone, and I found myself really savoring it. I thought she was too. Instead of sitting across from each other, Mercedes placed our plates side by side, and I liked that a lot. We spoke softly as night fell, getting to know each other better. Despite knowing each other for just a few hours, we felt comfortable sharing our thoughts and gently touching hands now and then. After tidying up the table and starting the dishwasher, we settled into 2 nearby loungers on the deck. I had already moved them close together, and she didn't mind. We stared at the evening sky for a long while, trying to name the stars and wondering if something shiny moving quickly was a satellite or something else. In that moment, it didn't matter. After a bit, I placed my hand on hers, and she didn't pull it away. When the evening coolness replaced the warmth of the day, we got up and headed back inside. At the door, Mercedes stopped suddenly, and I accidentally bumped into her. She turned, and before I knew it, we were close together. We shared a nice, long kiss that felt warm and comfortable. She pulled back gently, still holding onto my neck and keeping close. "I don't usually do this on a first date," she said softly with a gentle smile. "That's all right. I wouldn't know how to ask for it on a first date," I replied. I hadn't even thought of this as a date. I wasn't sure exactly what this was either, but at that moment it didn't seem important. She smiled up at me and leaned in for another kiss. This time, she let my lips meet hers for a long moment, our hands resting on each other's backs as we enjoyed the close connection. Her breathing quickened slightly. She pulled back and looked at me with a smile. "Hey, cowboy." I murmured, still caught up in the warmth of the moment. "When you showed me around the house earlier?" I responded, focusing on her words. "Think you could lead me back to that big old bed upstairs?" she asked, a hint of humor in her voice. That was all the invitation I needed. I closed up the back door, and we walked hand in hand through the house, turning off the lights as we went. I motioned for Mercedes to go up the stairs ahead of me, admiring her graceful movements as she climbed. She had an elegance about her, smooth and calm. Once upstairs, I pulled the bed covers back as she got comfortable. We both felt relaxed and left our things wherever they happened to land, not caring much for neatness in that moment. We shared a deep, lingering kiss, both of us savoring it. I knelt beside her, wanting to make sure she felt special and cared for, remembering the simple joy of making someone happy and comfortable. I was always taught that being attentive and thoughtful meant a lot. My Uncle Jake had shared that lesson with me, along with a few other life tips. He was the one who taught me to fly, and when you're flying for long stretches, there's not much to do but talk. Jake loved to share stories, mostly about flying, though sometimes he'd share advice on life and relationships. Uncle Jake never married, but he was rarely alone. People were naturally drawn to him, and he always had friends around people of all ages. Some were old friends, and a few were new acquaintances who looked up to him for advice. He was the kind of guy people leaned on for wisdom and a good laugh. He taught me a lot about confidence, respect, and kindness in the small moments, lessons that I took with me everywhere. I was pretty sure my parents would have been upset if they knew all the unconventional lessons Uncle Jake shared with me while I visited his house. With Mercedes, I wanted to show her the gentle approach I'd learned from him, making sure she felt comfortable and cared for. I leaned in close, creating a calm, peaceful moment for us both. We spoke quietly, sharing a laugh here and there, our connection feeling natural and unhurried. I was simply focused on her, making sure she was relaxed and took my time. As the evening went on, she leaned into the comfort, letting herself enjoy the quiet moments as we sat together. I focused on her reactions, responding softly, with a kind of unspoken understanding between us. I followed her lead, making sure every moment felt easy and respectful. Eventually, she settled into a peaceful, contented state, her hand resting gently on mine as she drifted off. We shared a few quiet words afterward, both relaxed and enjoying the calm atmosphere. In those final moments, I made sure she felt appreciated and comfortable, treating her with the same kindness and patience Uncle Jake had taught me to value in any relationship. We ended the night with a quiet, shared sense of contentment, both ready to embrace the quiet calm we'd created together. Then I started over, taking my time and moving gently. After a few moments, I gradually slowed down, easing into soft, gentle touches. I took a breath and gave a light chuckle. She murmured softly, looking at me. "I'm just happy," I replied with a smile. "This is the best time." I moved to lie beside her, resting my head on the pillow. She moved closer until she was resting her head beside mine, and we shared a quiet, contented smile. "Feels nice, doesn't it?" she asked softly. "Absolutely," I replied, "and I could stay like this all day." I kissed her again, moving gently, savoring the peaceful moment. We shared warm, lingering glances as I moved to her shoulder, giving her soft, gentle touches, creating a moment of closeness and care. As I gently kissed her shoulder, her hand rested lightly on mine. We both enjoyed the quiet, the connection unspoken but understood. Time passed in a calm rhythm, both of us comfortable and relaxed. After a while, she sighed contentedly, and I gently tucked a pillow under her to make her comfortable. We shared a final relaxed moment together before I lay back, both of us content with the shared warmth and calmness we'd created. We stayed that way for a long while, quiet and happy in each other's company, letting the peace of the moment settle over us. As we finally relaxed, we shared one more glance, feeling connected and close, grateful for the quiet happiness we'd found together. Lying next to her, I gently ran my hand from her shoulder down her arm and as far along her leg as I could reach. She caught her breath here and there, her body lightly shivering now and then as we relaxed together. She eventually placed her hand on my chest, holding my hand in hers and moving slightly closer until her head rested comfortably on my shoulder. With a small smile, she patted my chest in a warm, friendly way. "If you tell anyone, I'll deny every word," she murmured playfully. "But I need a break, I'm nearly worn out." She shifted a little, adjusting her position with a contented sigh before she settled down again, fully relaxed. "I didn't do a thing," I said innocently. She laughed a light, happy sound. "Maybe I was just a bit too comfortable," she said, smiling to herself. We lay there together, resting, chatting softly, and sharing a comfortable, easy connection. "So why didn't you and your ex-wife share this kind of closeness?" she asked after a while. "Hey now," I replied. I tried every chance I got, whether it was a few times a week or more when she was willing." I smiled. She was quiet, thinking. "Then maybe she didn't realize what she had," she answered with a small laugh. I laughed back. "Well, just so you know, I'm really enjoying getting to know you." She considered that with a grin. "Well, you're finally catching on, cowboy," she said warmly. We shared a playful moment, leading to a bit of gentle laughter, each of us just enjoying the time together. When I woke the next morning, her soft, dark hair rested across my chest, her head nestled against my shoulder with her legs gently intertwined with mine. Earlier, as dawn broke, she had wrapped herself close, letting us share a peaceful closeness. Her gentle breathing against my shoulder felt warm and calm, a connection I hadn't felt in a long time. I'd dated here and there since the divorce, but with Mercedes I felt something genuine. She stirred slightly and I kissed her forehead gently. She murmured, comfortable and content. She lifted her head and leaned in for a sweet kiss. "Ouch," she said, looking uncomfortable. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I'm lying on my hair," she explained with a laugh. "I got tangled up and can't get up." We untangled ourselves and found her hair that had gotten caught underneath us during the night. She sat up and pushed her hair back. "Easy there," she said playfully when she noticed my gaze. But she smiled brightly. She said with determination, "really need a shower, cowboy." "Well, as luck would have it," I replied. "So do I." And she hopped off the bed and danced around to me, reaching out her hand. We hurried into the large bathroom that had belonged to my parents. She playfully stopped me from exploring while we showered, saying if we started, we'd be in there all day and she was too hungry for that. Later, I won her over by carefully washing her long, lovely hair. Afterward, I brushed it out gently. She was content by the time I finished. For breakfast, we enjoyed bacon and scrambled eggs with toast and jam. I learned she proudly belonged to a group called the Carnivores Association of North America, which I had never heard of. I thought she fit that title perfectly since she had polished off her steak the night before and devoured all the bacon at the table. She admitted there was no such group, and I suggested we start one. She sat on my lap and kissed me, making me feel like I was dreaming. Breakfast truly set a wonderful tone for the day. Wearing one of my t-shirts, Mercedes found her phone and called her friend Stephanie to check in and make sure I hadn't caused any trouble. They talked for a while. I paid little attention and after putting on my jeans and boots, headed out to take the trash to the fire pit for burning and to clean out part of the big barn where the horse stable was. When I walked back inside, I grabbed a soda from the fridge. Mercedes was done with her call and her phone was charging on the sideboard next to mine. That's when it hit me. "I've got it!" I exclaimed, as a realization dawned on me about jeans, Mercedes, and horses. Mercedes looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Mom's things, she left everything." I waved my hand dramatically. "Let me explain. Mom and Dad didn't want the ranch anymore. They gave it to me to sell. They're traveling in an RV across the country and said I could keep whatever I wanted from the house. But anything I didn't want, I was supposed to burn, okay?" Mercedes nodded to show she understood my short version of events. And some of my mom's things, they're all clean and here like a couple of blue jeans. I looked at her thoughtfully. I guessed a pair of her jeans would fit you well enough. You could go riding in them if you still want to? She nodded happily. We ran upstairs. I showed Mercedes where Mom's old closet was, and she started to look through the clothes to see if she could find some pants or jeans to wear. I opened my laptop and started the video chat app. Just to be polite, I wanted to ask Mom if we could borrow the jeans, and I needed to call them anyway. "Hi, sweetie," Mom said when we connected. "I've been thinking of you. How are things going?" "Just fine, Mom. Sold Chip and Tattler last week." They were two of our horses. "And I think I have a buyer for the buffalo. I won't know for a few days if it's a deal or not. Other than that, most of the farm machinery is sold, and things are going pretty well. How are you all doing?" I heard some soft giggles from Mom's closet and a couple of light thuds. I looked around to see Mercedes pulling a large box out of the closet. I went back to listening to Mom as she talked about the Meteor Crater National Landmark and mentioned Winslow, Arizona being in a song. After a moment, I told her it was in a song by the Eagles called Take It Easy, and when it came out, she was excited. I didn't mention that I quickly found that info online to seem smart, even though I was just as curious as Mom at first. Mercedes caught my attention, holding something up that I guessed she found in the closet. I looked and was surprised. In her right hand, Mercedes was holding a pair of fur-lined handcuffs, and in her left, a matching set of cuffs for the ankles. I took the handcuffs from her. Mom," I asked, "what are these?" I held them up so she could see. I noticed the key to unlock them was taped to a length of chain. I let the cuffs hang in front of the laptop's camera. "Dang it, Tom, I thought you cleaned out the closet," Mom said firmly, looking off screen. "Nope," Dad replied simply. "You said you would get your box and put it in the RV, remember?" Mom turned back and pursed her lips. "Well, sweetie," she said carefully, "sometimes parents have things they enjoy doing together." I interrupted. "Mom, I know about that all right." I couldn't help but grin. "So, what's the story behind these?" She took a deep breath, looking like she was searching for the right words. Finally, she shrugged. "Matt, honey, your dad and I, we're older than you." "I'm glad we're still here." She smiled widely, clearly amused. "And we really enjoy our fun, right?" Mercedes handed me a unique harness. I blinked and held it up for the laptop camera. "And what is this, Mom?" I asked. Mom took a deep breath. "Well, you see," she began. She looked a bit annoyed, probably thinking about Dad. "Tom, you should have reminded me about the box." She didn't seem to expect an answer. "So, sweetie, maybe on his birthday? Your dad might have a special evening if one of my friends comes over for, you know." That was a bit too much detail, but I was having a great time teasing my mom. I was beginning to realize there were things about my parents I never knew. On the other hand, I could tell they were quite a lively and loving couple, and adventurous too. I suddenly remembered something. "Oh no, you mean like when Aunt Janet visited and stayed over?" I asked. "Aunt Janet was just a close friend of my mom's, but maybe they were closer than I thought." Mom hesitated. She didn't really say yes, but her silence didn't sound like a no either. Wow, I couldn't believe it. "So, when you sent me to my cabin on Dad's birthday, you guys were—" "Don't be rude, Matthew," Mom said, sounding serious. "I promise, Mom," I replied. "But why?" "Because I have a rule, boy. When your dad enjoys himself, I do too." I didn't say anything more. My mind was racing. "Hi, sweetie," Mom called out. I was puzzled about what she was planning. She had already greeted me. "Is my son treating you well?" she asked. "Why don't you introduce us, Matthew?" she continued, clearly addressing me. I was confused. Mercedes wasn't in the camera view and was being quietly, so Mom shouldn't have known anyone was there with me. "Son," Mom said with a hint of disapproval, "you do remember my big mirror is behind you, right?" I turned to look. There it was, the old full-length mirror Mom kept in the room. Mercedes was standing there, and in the reflection, I saw her checking out something. I casually adjusted my t-shirt to cover up the view. I sighed. Things were getting tricky. "Mom, say hello to Mercedes." "Mercedes, this is my mom," I said, making the introductions. Mercedes waved at the mirror, then turned toward me so the camera could see her. "Hi, Mrs. Singletary," she said cheerfully. Mom laughed. "Sweetheart, after the talk you've been listening to, we can skip the formalities. Just call me Leah." "Just like in Star Wars," Mom said happily. She was smiling brightly. "Okay, Leah," Mercedes said quickly. "I think it's nice how you and your son can talk so openly. It's wonderful." They chatted for a while and I started to tune them out. I wasn't sure if my mom noticed my hand resting on Mercedes's thigh, but I wondered if I still needed to hide it. It was a strange morning. Then I saw my dad come into view briefly. He greeted Mercedes before disappearing from sight, just the back of his head going down. My mom leaned back a little, grasped the table edge, then came forward again. I was confused for a moment. "Mom, Dad, My mom looked at me playfully. "Honey, you don't think you're the only one Uncle Jake has helped, do you?" she said with a sweet tone. She gasped and leaned forward again. I was shocked. Did my mom know Uncle Jake had taught me everything I knew? What about the other things I learned from his girlfriends? "Sugar, I need to go now, okay?" Mom said unsteadily. Her eyes wandered to Mercedes. "Just don't do anything we wouldn't, all right?" She reached to press a key on her laptop. "Mom!" I intervened quickly before she could end the chat. "What would you not do?" She thought for a moment. "Honey, I'll get back to you on that, okay?" She replied sweetly. "Nice to meet you, Mercedes," she called out. She pressed a key and her image disappeared. I closed my laptop and looked at Mercedes. I was surprised, but not upset. "Cowboy," Mercedes said softly, "how badly do you want to go for a ride?" she asked, walking toward the bed with a pair of cuffs. I didn't wait to answer. I moved quickly towards her. In no time, she had her shirt off and was lying on the bed with her wrists in the cuffs and her legs open when I reached her. We didn't go horseback riding that day or the next. We did go on the fourth day. We needed a break. That was how things went through the weekend and into the next week. Everything had changed on Thursday. "Honey, Matt," Mercedes asked gently at breakfast. She had been quiet since we woke up, and I could tell something was on her mind. "Uh-huh," I responded calmly, preparing for whatever was bothering her. "You know Stephanie, right?" "I do. Well, I don't know her well, but I know who you mean." Mercedes nodded. Could we invite her to stay with us? Would that be okay?" I was surprised. Things between Mercedes and me had been going well. We got along really well in every way. We did the morning chores together, cooked meals, took walks almost to the road, went riding, and really enjoyed being together. At least, that's what I thought. Why did she want to bring someone here who might make it harder for Mercedes and me to get closer? But then, her question about having Stephanie stay with us was an interesting choice of words. "Sure," I replied calmly. There was no need to create obstacles. If Mercedes didn't want to be alone with me, that was that. I might as well go with the flow. Mercedes smiled right away. "Thanks, sweetie. I'll call her, okay?" "Of course." She took my hand as she made the call and pulled me next to her. It seemed like she wanted my support while she talked to her friend. I saw this as a good sign. "Hi, Steffi," Mercedes said to her friend. "Cowboy said yes, so it's a go." "Uh-huh. We can practice some routines. The living room has a nice floor and—" "Yes, Stephanie." Horses, yes, the airplane too. Stephanie, please listen." She rolled her eyes at me. "Okay, yeah, we'll do all kinds of things. Just pack, Stephanie. Steffi, hush. Please listen to me. Just bring a few things. No, you won't need much. We're pretty laid back, okay? Yeah, I know. Listen, pack my extra brushes and hairdryer and... Yeah, you know what I mean. Right." She said we again, referring to me and her. I liked that. It made me feel good about this situation. Then, a thought hit me. I waved to get her attention. "Hang on a minute, Steph," Mercedes said into the phone. "Does she know how to find us?" I asked. Mercedes had talked about Stephanie bringing things to the ranch. Mercedes sighed and shook her head, which made me smile. "If she can reach McReady's airfield, we can go pick her up in the plane. What do you think?" I gave her the address and started giving some directions. "She has a GPS," Mercedes said, cutting me off. She told Stephanie the address and looked back at me. "When?" she asked. "How soon can she arrive?" Mercedes checked and got an answer. "In a couple of hours?" I nodded, glancing at the wall clock. "Okay, tell her we'll be there at 1 o'clock." Then I remembered something Mercedes had mentioned to Stephanie. I waved for her to cover the microphone. Was she worried about the laid-back thing you told her? I asked. Mercedes grinned widely. Nope, Steph is. Well, maybe a little adventurous. I returned her smile with one of my own. I had a playful idea. Okay, tell her. How about putting her on speaker so I can talk to her? Mercedes did that, tapping an icon on the screen and setting the phone on the table. I sat down next to her. Stephanie? I said. Hey, this is, Cowboy. Hi, Cowboy, she answered cheerfully. She sounded confident and friendly. She had chatted with me when I filled in for Mercedes during some of their long talks, so Mercedes could take a quick break. Say, Steph, we'll come down to meet you at McReady's like Mercedes said, but I think you should know it's National Nude Flying Day. Did you know that? No. What does that mean? Stephanie asked, confused. I smiled at Mercedes. Well, Stephanie, it means that everyone on a small plane must fly without clothes if they take off between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., and that includes us. I'm really sorry, but I don't think we can avoid it, I told her. Mercedes was trying hard not to laugh. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. Well, Stephanie said uncertainly, I guess it's okay. Do I need to drive to the airport without clothes? Oh no, not at all, I assured her. I didn't want the police to stop her on the way there. But when you get into the parking lot at McReady's well, you'll need to be ready when you exit the car and walk to the plane. Okay? Very important. I was just teasing her, but I was having fun with this prank. Make sure not to leave the car until you see Mercedes and me taxi up to the side of the field nearest the parking lot, okay? Okay, Stephanie said happily. I got up and went to the kitchen to make some quick sandwiches. We had made a nice roast dinner the night before, and I was thinking about those roast beef sandwiches. Mercedes helped me do a quick check on the Cessna. It was the first time I had done it without clothes, and it was a lot of fun too. We put a change of clothes in the luggage compartment, but we flew without any clothes on except for sandals. Are you sure this'll be okay? Mercedes asked once again. Honey, I replied, I can't remember the last time I was stopped by the Sky Police while flying. Oh, wait, never. I smiled. This was going to be great. McReady's was a small airfield outside the city. It didn't have a control tower and wasn't very busy. It was often used by weekend pilots who just wanted to get up in the air for a bit. I knew the field, the owner, and the staff there very well. I liked them, and they liked me. I did a flyby over the airfield, looking down into the parking lot. It was almost 1 o'clock, and there, a small car was pulling in. I held the Cessna in a sharp turn to the right, letting Mercedes get a better look. Is that Stephanie in that green car? I asked. It's not green, yeah, that's her, Mercedes told me. I straightened up, flew my approach, and then landed the Cessna smoothly. As we taxied toward the parking lot, I saw a pretty blonde get out of the car, ready for our arrival. She walked to the edge of the grassy airstrip, carrying 2 small bags. With confidence, she approached the Cessna and followed my hand signals to go to the other side. In just a moment, she was outside the plane, handing me the bags. I quickly placed them in the seat behind me. Stephanie climbed in and settled into the back seat, while Mercedes got into the front with me. She fastened her seatbelt, her face shining with excitement. We all smiled at our fun adventure. I started the engine, taxied, and took off a couple of minutes later. Victor Papa Romeo, 319er, said a voice on the radio. It was Gene, who owned the airfield. He wasn't a control tower since the airfield didn't even have one, so this was probably just a friendly call. I gestured for Mercedes and Stephanie to put on the headphones I had ready for them. Victor Papa Romeo, 319er, I replied, smiling to myself. 319er. Please return to McReady Field for, passenger checks, copy? Gene could barely contain his laughter, and I could hear some chuckles in the background. I couldn't help but smile wider. Negative, McReady, I said. 319er is headed to our home port for a important event, 10-4. A lot of people here would really like you to stay and chat, Matt, he replied, dropping any attempt to sound serious. I understand, Gene, I said, but it's important for me to get where I'm going, copy? You rascal, he joked back. Woof, woof, I laughed. Victor Papa Romeo, 319er, out. I then set a course to fly home and showed the girls how to switch their headsets to talk to each other. Okay, what's going on? Stephanie asked. Mercedes giggled. You fell for it, girl, she told Stephanie. There's no such thing as nude flying day. Very glad to. See you, Miss Stephanie, I joked, offering my hand for a handshake. Ang! Stephanie said, playfully swatting my hand away. Just like that man said, you rascal. But her tone didn't sound upset. Mercedes had mentioned that Stephanie was sometimes a bit bold, and that seemed true. She had a lively personality and long legs and blonde hair styled nicely. One thing I found puzzling was that Mercedes had mentioned earlier that Stephanie was a lesbian, but then added, "At least Stephanie thinks she is." Stephanie seemed pretty comfortable, so I wasn't sure what to think. I felt confused, but didn't dwell on it too much. I was enjoying the company of two young women. They were both very comfortable being themselves. I felt really happy in that moment. We spent the afternoon showing Stephanie around the house and yard. We introduced her to Ginger and my horse, whom my dad named Hoss a long time ago. I also suggested a lovely chestnut horse for her to ride if we all went out together. Most of the day was spent by the pool, where the two girls shared stories about their lives. Mercedes included me in their chat, helping Stephanie and me talk and get to know each other better. As the sun began to set, we felt more relaxed with each other. Mercedes started moving a little closer to me, casually touching me and getting a bit nearer than before. She kissed me from time to time, and it seemed like she wanted to show Stephanie that we were close. When we finished locking the outside doors for the night, Mercedes took both of our hands and led us upstairs to the bedroom. There had not been any talk about what would happen next, but it seemed clear that the two women had an idea in mind from the moment Stephanie arrived. I didn't say anything to disagree. As we entered the room, Mercedes whispered in my ear, "Remember, she thinks she's a lesbian, okay?" Mercedes had mentioned this before, but I wasn't sure what that meant. I wondered if she wanted me to pay attention to the word thinks. I decided to see how things went. Mercedes then sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand and Stephanie's, pulling us down beside her. She lay back, looking at me and then at Stephanie. She let go of our hands and rested her fingers on the bedding. "Please, I want you both," she said softly. Stephanie looked at me over Mercedes, and I looked back at her. "Steffi, would you help me with Mercedes?" I asked gently. I was a little nervous because I'd heard Mercedes call her that name, but I wasn't sure how Stephanie would feel if I did. Stephanie thought for a moment, then nodded slightly and leaned in closer to Mercedes. Mercedes rested comfortably beside me as I gently held her, focused on making her feel relaxed and supported. I could tell by her breathing that she was deeply at ease, and we shared a peaceful closeness, both content. Stevie was nearby, offering her own gentle care for Mercedes, as we all enjoyed the moment, each of us simply happy to be there. Mercedes looked at me, giving a small smile, which I returned, appreciating the warmth in her gaze. We all shared an unspoken understanding, each contributing to the calming atmosphere that filled the room. "Matt," Mercedes whispered quietly, her voice filled with appreciation. I held her hand, and we continued to share a few more gentle moments together. I didn't look directly at Steffi, respecting the quiet understanding between us all. We each took turns creating a warm, comforting environment for Mercedes, a light-hearted sense of trust building among us. Mercedes rested, and her smile told me that she was at peace, grateful for the comfort and care we all shared. Our focus was on being there for one another, and it created a bond that made the moment feel uniquely special. In time, we found an easy rhythm of support, each person doing their part to create a sense of calm and happiness. We all felt connected in our shared goal, to make Mercedes feel valued, peaceful, and content. There was no rush. We simply let the natural rhythm of care and friendship guide us, allowing us all to rest comfortably, with Mercedes happy and surrounded by the friends who truly cared for her. Mercedes and I shared a quiet, close moment together, our laughter light as we relaxed beside each other. She reached over, giving me a reassuring pat before leaning back with a contented smile. After a moment, she gently wrapped her arm around Steffi, pulling her closer between us. "Matt," Mercedes said softly, "show Steffi some kindness, all right?" I understood her meaning. She felt Steffi could use the same gentle care and attention Mercedes had experienced, and so I agreed. Together, we created a calm, comforting space around Steffi. We exchanged warm glances, each of us helping to make sure Steffi felt valued and supported, as we took turns offering her quiet words of encouragement. Mercedes chuckled softly. "Stevie, relax and enjoy," she whispered with a smile. Her tone was lighthearted, and she gave Stevie an encouraging nod. Following Mercedes' lead, I shared a few gentle touches, noticing that Stevie began to relax. We all took our time, creating a peaceful, connected atmosphere, one of trust and ease. Stevie sighed contentedly and gave me a thankful smile as Mercedes offered quiet encouragement. In this calm environment, I stayed attentive, showing support and taking each moment slowly. Mercedes noticed and placed a pillow beneath Stevie for added comfort, making sure she felt cared for. We shared a few more gentle moments as Stevie began to breathe more evenly, clearly at ease. Eventually, I leaned back, sharing a soft look with Mercedes, both of us proud to see Stevie so at peace. We all shared a final smile together, feeling relaxed and happy in each other's company. We kept the mood light, each of us taking joy in the shared friendship and calm connection that filled the room. Her hands were gently holding my shoulders. She wrapped her arms around my waist, drawing me closer to her. Then we started moving together, both of us putting in a lot of effort and breathing hard. Suddenly, Stevie stopped. Her body shook and her eyes widened. She held onto my arms tightly, keeping me above her. I could feel a strong wave of emotion pass through her. She let out a sharp sound and then relaxed, her eyes closing as she laid back. A small shiver ran through her body before she became still. I felt ready to collapse, so I pulled away from her. I had intended to roll to one side, but Mercedes gently pulled me toward the other direction. I ended up lying down between both women, tired and resting on my back. Stevie playfully tapped my chest, trying to get my attention. "What?" I asked, surprised. "I was going to be so happy being with women," she said. "And then you had to go and change that." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just stroked her arm, hoping to think of something to say later. No, she said softly. "Just be still for a moment, okay?" Mercedes laughed and cuddled up on my right side, resting her head on my shoulder. She giggled again. "I had to stop him from touching me the first night we were together too," she said to Stevie. They both started giggling at the memory. I thought that was a secret, but it seemed like best friends shared everything. For a while we enjoyed the quiet, resting together until Stevie poked me playfully. "Stevie," I said, raising my voice a bit. "We need to agree not to poke or hit each other, okay?" "Wuss," Stevie replied, not sorry at all. "Listen, you're divorced, right?" "I am. Want to see the papers? A real judge signed them?" "No, that's okay. I believe you. But Mercedes said it was because your wife was involved with another woman and a guy, right?" "Yep," I told her. "But we just did something similar and you didn't seem to think it was wrong. What's the deal?" "This is different," I explained. "None of us is married, and that makes a difference." I added, "Stevie, it wasn't about what they did. It was about them being in a situation where they shouldn't have been together at all." I recalled the day I learned about her actions. They weren't supposed to be fooling around in the first place, no matter what kind of fun they were having. My wife made a promise to forsake all others, and I did too. It's right there in our wedding vows. What we just did is different. I get that it's the same type of fun, but none of us is married. None of us is in another relationship as far as I know. The girls both shook their heads. "So, none of us has committed to anyone else. None of us is exclusive with anyone else, right?" I concluded. "Do you see where I'm coming from, Stephanie?" I asked a bit nervously. "Yeah," she replied. "Great," I said with a smile. "The lecture from Professor Matt is officially over." I playfully patted her and Mercedes's legs. "So, who wants to take a quick shower and then go downstairs to grab something to eat? I'm really hungry." We took our shower together after agreeing to avoid any intimate touches, since that would slow us down. We were all three really hungry. We had already burned a lot of energy, and we'd probably use even more when we changed the sheets and maybe flipped the mattress. I didn't want to be in the wet spot any more than they did. For the next 15 days, the three of us enjoyed each other's company in and out of bed. The girls helped with morning chores, and we went riding. I finally saw Ginger running at full speed with Mercedes riding her, her long black hair flowing behind her. We swam in our pool and took trips to the lake to ride jet skis. We did all sorts of fun things. When we weren't out doing something, we spent time together in many different ways. I spent time with each of the girls on their own, and they also enjoyed time together. Sometimes they wanted to spend time alone, but usually I joined in at some point. We were together in every room of the house, out in the tall grass beyond the barn, and on picnic blankets in the open fields. We did other activities too. I took the girls dancing in the city a couple of times, and we had dinner at nice restaurants several times. We drove their Range Rover into town and cleared out their apartment. I spent a little more than 3 weeks with Mercedes, 1 week just with her, and then 2 weeks with both Mercedes and Stephanie. Those were the best weeks of my life. On our last night, we planned to share a special moment together, but Mercedes and I decided instead to just be close and support each other. She and Stephanie were leaving in the morning, and we were all struggling with that. "You know why I asked if Stephanie could come out here, right?" Mercedes asked softly. I nodded in the dim light of the bedroom. The darkness was only lit by the moonlight shining faintly through the window. "If we had just a little more time alone here," I said. "Then tomorrow might not come at all," I added with a heavy heart. "And Stevie needs to understand who she truly is. It's different than she thinks," I continued. "It seems like she's doing okay, but I'm worried it might create a distance between us." I paused for a moment. "Did it help you?" I asked gently. She sighed. "I'm not sure," she replied sadly. "Maybe," she thought quietly. "If we get through tomorrow, maybe it will be enough." "But I didn't expect Stevie to feel so strongly for you," Mercedes said with a hint of playfulness. "Or you for her." I had no words. Everything felt so tangled. We stayed quiet for a while. "And you know about Stevie and me dancing together?" "I do. You both grew up together, started dancing when you were little, and now you're preparing for that big performance in Philadelphia." "I know," I said. "Maybe I could stay here and find—" "No, that wouldn't work," I interrupted. "The chance you have in Philadelphia is too special. There's nothing like it here. I wouldn't want to take that dream away from you. That wouldn't be fair, and after some time, you might wonder what could have been. That could cause issues between us, no matter how hard we tried to avoid it." I took a deep breath and released it slowly. "If I followed you to Philadelphia, you would be busy with dance, and we wouldn't have much time together. With all the traveling and everything." I sighed again. "We can't make that work either." We could have talked more, going in circles, but then there was a knock on the door. Stevie sniffled softly, trying to hold back her tears. "Can I sleep with you too?" she asked in a small voice. She had meant to give Mercedes and me the night alone, but the thought of facing tomorrow alone was too painful for her. "Of course," I said gently, looking at Mercedes. She nodded. "Come here and let me hold you," I said to Stevie. She crawled under the covers and nestled close to me. I lay on my back while the girls rested their heads on my shoulders. We didn't get intimate, but we felt closer than ever. After Mercedes and Stevie left, I felt completely lost. They didn't call or text, and I didn't reach out either. We had all agreed that it would only make things harder, and there was nothing to be done. It hurt deeply, though. I focused on getting the ranch sold or given away. I sold all my cattle to a ranch near Kingsville. They planned to mix them with their herd to bring in some new genetics. I sold Ginger and another 3-year-old mare to a family named Ingram for $1 each. Fred and Sarah Ingram had 2 daughters, 13-year-old Amber and 11-year-old Pamela, who instantly fell in love with the horses. One day they stopped at my gate while I was getting the horses ready. By the time Fred finally got the girls to leave, my shirt was soaked with their happy tears from hugging me so much. It warmed my heart to see them so joyful. The rest of the horses sold quickly, and I sold the buffalo to a rancher in Colorado who already had some there. I also sent the remaining farm vehicles to an auction in the next county, and they sold fast too. That wrapped up my selling. I gave Uncle Jake's old Cessna 172 to Gene McReady for his pilot training program. He and one of his friends flew me back home after I dropped off the plane. They chatted happily the whole way about the time I flew out of their airfield with 2 passengers. I didn't invite them into the house when we got to the ranch because I was tired of discussing that day. I wanted to forget about Mercedes and Stephanie. I drained the pool and filled it with rocks and soil to keep animals from falling in. Then I searched the house for any items that someone might want, checking several times to ensure I didn't miss anything Mom might have left behind. I got all the permits I needed for a controlled burn and set fire to the old ranch house and the small house where I lived as a teenager. The local volunteer fire department was on standby while the houses burned. We celebrated with baby back ribs, brisket, and all the sides from Jesse's for the fire crews, along with plenty of soda and bottled water. Everyone stayed long after the fire was out, enjoying food and chatting until they got calls from their partners wondering where they were. That night, I stayed at a motel, feeling disconnected from everything that had tied me here. The next morning, I headed for California. My parents were on their way to Yosemite, and I planned to meet them there for a short visit. It probably looked a bit funny, a 30-year-old man visiting his parents at a campsite in the woods. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.